Chapter 1181. All the martial artists present looked at Yi Zongxin with extreme fear. Although Yi Zongxin did not seem to have any killing intent and was even smiling, he was definitely not the first on the blood ranking. Yi Zongxin was also a ruthless person who had massacred a city. He was a typical smiling tiger. However, what was even more frightening was his background. Because he did not belong to the 6 major forces or the Mara royal family, his background was very mysterious. Yi Zongxin looked at Princess Luo Ho and smiled faintly. "I heard that someone made the princess unhappy?" Princess Luo Ho did not say anything. Yi Zongxin's black eyes turned to Duguqiuma. He glanced at Wanner with a slightly surprised look, as if he knew something. Duguqiuma said faintly, "What? Are you going to stand up for Princess Luo Ho?" "Ha! You're not worthy enough for me to use the demon edge sword." Yi Zongxin wiped the demon edge sword with a white cloth and shook his head faintly. What he meant was that Duguqiuma was not worthy enough for him to attack. "You're being underestimated." Wanner chuckled at the side and fanned the flames. Duguqiuma did not care. He was not someone who would attack casually. Those who underestimated him would naturally pay the price. Just as the atmosphere fell into silence, a cold voice that carried boundless coldness broke this silence. "Duguqiuma die." A black gold halberd shot over from afar with the power to pierce through gold and stone. It charged toward Duguqiuma. Duguqiuma raised his eyebrows slightly. He held the God Devourer sword and flicked it upward. There was a clanging sound of metal colliding, and sparks flew. A powerful force surged over. Duguqiuma's arm shook, and the force was dispelled. The black gold halberd turned back and buzzed before landing in the hands of a figure. That person wore black gold armor and a blood-red cloak fluttered behind him. Under the black hair was a cold face with a murderous aura. It was the 3rd on the blood ranking, the strongest genius of Mystic Demon Palace, Yuan Hua. "Yuan Hua is here." Yuan Hua's arrival caused a huge commotion. Everyone's eyes shifted back and forth between Yuan Hua and Duguqiuma. The enmity between the two could be said to be growing deeper and deeper. Duguqiuma first killed Yuan Hua's younger brother, Yuan Huang, then killed Mystic Demon Palace's Master Hun. Now, he and Yuan Hua were in a situation where one of them had to die. Dugu begs the demon to pay with his life for Yuan Huang and Master Hun Demon. Yuan Hua clasped the black gold halberd in his hand, and without any superfluous words, he directly attacked. 4th layer divine dwelling stage chi gushed out, and his black hair danced wildly in the wind, as though a demonic war god had awakened. Duguqiuma didn't say anything either. Be it Yuan Huang or Master Hun Demon, they were the ones who first targeted Dugu. Since they were targeting him, they had to be prepared to be killed. Duguqiuma was not a soft-hearted person. He held the God Devourer sword in his hand and charged forward without any fear. Boom! A great battle broke out, and chi spread out like ripples. Wanner, Princess Luo Ho, the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple, Yi Zongxin and the others were all watching. All the surrounding experts also wanted to know who was stronger between Yuan Hua and Duguqiuma. There was no need to say much about Yuan Hua, who had been ranked 3rd on the blood ranking for a long time. Except for Yi Zongxin and Princess Luo Ho, no one could shake his position. Duguqiuma, on the other hand, was like a fiend star that had appeared out of nowhere, slaughtering 13 cities in a row, and then triumphantly advancing all the way, killing Yuan Huang, Zonglai Yangbue, Shan Yu, Miao Yu, and even Master Hun Demon, who ranked 4th on the blood ranking. It could be said that Duguqiuma's road to fame was a road stained with blood. The collision of the two could be said to have attracted everyone's attention. Demon-splitting slash. Yuan Hua poured his chi into the black gold halberd, and the sharp halberd light, which seemed to be able to cut through the sky, ruthlessly slashed at Duguqiuma. Duguqiuma displayed the Demon 13 swords, and the blood-red sword light split the air, colliding with Yuan Hua's attack. A violent buzzing sound resounded in everyone's ears, as if a metal star had exploded, erupting with an ear-piercing sound. After one blow, the two were forced back at the same time. Yuan Hua suddenly found that there was a small gap on the blade of the black gold halberd. His divine weapon is strange. Yuan Hua's eyes darkened. Seeing this, Dugu Chioma displayed the battle god demon body again. Black demonic patterns spread out from under his skin, causing his physical strength to soar. Then he displayed the sky-devouring secret technique again, and his strength soared to the 3rd level of the divine dwelling realm. Is this your trump card? Yuanhua's tone was cold. Although Dugu Chioma's strength had soared by 3 small realms, Yuanhua was not afraid. As the 3rd on the blood ranking, he naturally had the confidence to be the 3rd on the blood ranking. Thorny splitting slash. Yuanhua spun the black gold halberd in his hand, and terrifying demonic chi erupted. Countless halberd lights spread out like black thorns, turning the surrounding area into a forbidden land. All the surrounding cultivators hurriedly retreated, for fear of being affected. Every ray of halberd light was enough to penetrate a divine dwelling heaven pride. Kill! Yuanhua roared, and the black gold halberd charged toward Dugu Chioma with the power of the halberd technique. Wherever it passed, deep cracks were plowed in the ground, and halberd light pierced through the air, shattering the world. Seeing this, Dugu Chioma changed the demon 13 swords again. The 2 swords, Blood Kill and Death Shadow, were unable to completely block Yuanhua's killing move. Is that all you've got? Yuanhua sneered cruelly. Ah. Dugu Chioma's eyes were cold. He once again displayed the 3rd sword of the demon 13 swords. Star Burning. A sword streaked across the sky, and demonic flames billowed as if it could burn stars. Then, Dugu Chioma stomped his feet on the ground, soared into the air, and swooped down to display the 4th sword. Moon Severing. The god-devouring sword light turned into a curved arc, as if it could cut through the blue moon. But it didn't stop there. Dugu Chioma instantly gathered the chi in his body and displayed the 5th sword. Sun Erosion. The sword was unsheathed to suppress ghosts and gods, and 1 sword to destroy the universe. The 3rd, 4th, and 5th sword of the demon 13 swords were all displayed. The 3 sword lights split the world, and the incomparable demonic power shook the universe. Rumble. Halberd light and sword light collided, and smoke and dust filled the air. Amidst the confusion, the sound of coughing blood was heard. Everyone's eyes suddenly widened. They saw Yuanhua's figure rapidly retreating, blood spurting from the corners of his mouth, and the black gold battle armor on his body was riddled with sword marks. The black gold halberd in his hand was also chipped in many places. In this collision, Yuanhua was at a disadvantage. Hua! An uproar broke out in all directions, and all the cultivators turned their eyes to Dugu Chioma. Dugu Chioma also had some wounds on his body, but no blood flowed out. His expression didn't change at all, as if he didn't care about his injuries at all. 3rd on the blood ranking, you do have some skills, Dugu Chioma said lightly. Since his rise in the Maluo dynasty, he had killed all his opponents. Only Yuanhua, whom he couldn't defeat cleanly. Of course, this was also related to the fact that Dugu Chioma didn't use his full strength. These few moves were just a test. It could be said that Dugu Chioma's performance even made Yitsong Shin take him seriously. Dugu Chioma, don't be too proud. I haven't used my full strength either. Yuanhua said coldly, and was about to attack again. At this moment, a frivolous and leisurely voice suddenly sounded. The deepest part of the Azura Bloody Road is quite lively. Hearing this voice, Dugu Chioma's attention suddenly turned, and his eyes were as sharp as a sword. Gu Xiaoyang. Chapter 1182. In the distance, 2 black-cloaked figures stepped through the air. That frivolous and leisurely voice came from none other than one of them. Yuanhua and Dugu Chioma had temporarily stopped their battle. Dugu Chioma's gaze was fixed on the figure. Dugu Chioma would never forget that voice. As someone who shared the same knowledge with Yiguchen, Dugu Chioma's voice was also deeply engraved in his mind. He didn't dare to forget their fated enmity for even a moment. Unlike Dugu Chioma, the other cultivators didn't know the inside story. Yuanhua, Princess Luoho, the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple, and the others were all bewildered. The reason for that was because they felt an extreme sense of danger from those 2 figures. Only Yitsongshin's ink-black eyes were deep in thought. Since you're here, why hide? Princess Luoho said coldly. You're Princess Luoho of the Mola Empire. You're indeed as cold and beautiful as the rumors say. You're quite beautiful. The frivolous voice contained a hint of arrogance. All the surrounding cultivators were surprised. How dare this person be so impudent to Princess Luoho? How dare you disrespect Princess Luoho? You're courting death. The Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple jumped out again. He had wanted to help Princess Luoho when she was in trouble, but Dugu Chioemo had stopped him. Not only that, he had been defeated and forced to flee. It could be said that he had lost all face in front of Princess Luoho. But fortunately, he now had a chance to show off. Without hesitation, the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple swung his white bone staff at the cloaked figure with a cruel smile. Dugu Chioemo ruined my chance to show off last time. I won't fail this time, right? While the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple was thinking, he heard a cold sneer from the other side. The vision of an ant is really pitiful. The figure formed a seal with his hands and blasted out a palm. The terrifying true chi of the 6th level of the Divine Dwelling stage poured out, condensing into a dazzling seal overflowing with starlight that crushed towards the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple. Great Luo Star Seal. As the seal slammed down, it was as if a star was falling. No. How is this possible? Who the hell are you? The Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple sucked in a deep breath as he felt a chill run down his spine. Wasn't he just trying to impress Princess Luoho? Why was it that he kept encountering such a powerful freak? The Heaven Witchcraft Godchild wanted to cry, but no tears came out. But now, the Heaven Witchcraft Godchild could no longer regret his decision. With a loud bang, the star seal directly crushed the Heaven Witchcraft Godchild's body to dust. The 6th on the blood ranking, the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple, was killed in one move. Dead silence. Around the Azura Blood Sea, the expressions of all the martial artists suddenly changed, as if they had seen a ghost. Even Princess Luoho and Yuan Hua were slightly shocked. They could also kill the Heaven Witchcraft Sect's disciple, but it wouldn't be so easy. Only 3 people's expressions did not change. One of them was Yi Zongshan. With a meaningful look in his eyes, he muttered to himself, "The martial arts of the Starry Sword Pavilion?" Er's face was also expressionless. She had expected this, so she was not surprised at all. Her eyes flashed as if she was thinking about how to deal with them. The last one was Dugu Chuma. He suppressed the strong murderous intent in his heart, because if he exposed himself too much, he might attract Gu Xiaoyang's suspicion. Now, he could not let Gu Xiaoyang know that Yiguchen was still alive. At least, he could not expose his identity before participating in the prodigy battlefield. Otherwise, not to mention Yiguchen, even the Sword Dynasty would be implicated. The powerful means of an overlord force were far stronger than those of a top dynasty. "Or you?" Princess Luoho asked in a low voice. They took off their cloaks and revealed their true identities. Gu Xiaoyang stood with his hands behind his back. He was wearing a star robe and a star crown, exuding the aura of a superior. He looked at Princess Luoho and the other dynasty prodigies as if he was looking at lowly peasants. Yi Songyue was wearing a white robe, like a fairy from the Moon Palace descending to the mortal world. She was as cold as frost and extremely beautiful. "You are..." Princess Luoho's cold eyes trembled slightly under her mask. Even though she was a princess, she was shocked at this moment because she recognized who it was. Starry Sword Pavilion, Gu Xiaoyang. Misty Sword Pavilion, Yi Songyue. Her true identity was exposed, causing an uproar. All the martial artists were extremely shocked. They did not expect that the prodigies of an overlord force in the Nantian region would come to the Molo dynasty to participate in the Azura Bloody Path. If this news spread, the Demon Queen and other pseudo-saint experts would be shocked. The corners of Gu Xiaoyang's mouth curled into a sneer as he looked at the terrified uproar in the surroundings. Yi Songyue turned to Wan'er and said in a cold voice, "You are indeed here." Everyone's eyes fell on Wan'er, and the look in their eyes changed again. Is she the famous witch of the demonic sect? Many martial artists said in surprise. Princess Luoho was also surprised and looked at Wan'er in surprise. She vaguely knew that the Molo dynasty seemed to have some connection with the demonic sect. Ha, Sister Tsangyue, you found me. One covered her face with a black veil, but she still smiled and did not look nervous at all. Yi Tsangyue's face was cold, and her cold moon-like eyes turned to Duguchima. It seems that it is him, Tsangyue murmured. At that moment, she was certain that the person Wan was looking for was Duguchima. He was also the executioner who had massacred 13 cities, someone that she disliked. This person hasn't even reached the divine dwelling stage. Gu Xiaoyang frowned. He didn't believe that a person who had triggered the demon emperor descending to the 9th heaven phenomenon hadn't even reached the divine dwelling stage. At the same time, for some reason, Gu Xiaoyang felt an instinctive irritation and disgust when he saw this person, as though he was repelled by this person. The appearance of 3 overlord forces heaven prides in a row made the other Molo dynasty martial artists present look a little solemn. In particular, Princess Luoho and Yuanhua felt the pressure double. Given their strength, although they wouldn't be killed instantly like the Heaven Witch sect's disciple, they still had no chance of winning. Yi Tsangyue's eyes were fixed on Duguchima. She absolutely couldn't let Wan safely bring Duguchima back to the demon extermination sect. What, does elder sister want to fight me now? Wan flashed and landed beside Duguchima. She could stop Yi Tsangyue, but she wasn't sure if Duguchima could stop Gu Xiaoyang. The whole scene was filled with the smell of gunpowder because of the enmity between the fairy and the witch, and it seemed that a fight would break out at any moment. Seeing this, Yuanhua didn't attack Duguchima for the time being. On the other hand, Gu Xiaoyang's eyes flickered as he looked at the Azura Blood Sea. His main purpose wasn't to deal with Wan, but to obtain the inheritance of the supreme expert in the depths of the Azura Blood Road. Yi Tsangshan also had the same idea as him. Fairy Tsangyue, I don't think it's the time for the final battle, said Gu Xiaoyang. Yi Tsangshan also stepped forward and said, I think so too. Hearing Yi Tsangshan's words, Yi Tsangyue and Wan both looked over. They were a little surprised because they felt that Yi Tsangshan wasn't weaker than them. At this moment, the entire Azura Blood Sea suddenly surged with huge blood-red waves. Then, blood demons appeared one after another. Ordinary blood demons, elite blood demons, and golden body blood demons. There were hundreds and thousands of them. At the same time, a blood-red whirlpool appeared in the depths of the Azura Blood Sea. A majestic and ancient blood-red palace vaguely floated in the whirlpool. The greatest opportunity of the Azura Blood Road had finally appeared. Chapter 1183. When they saw the blood-colored palace in the whirlpool in the depths of the Blood Sea, all the cultivators' eyes were burning with passion. Many of them had heard that there was an ultimate expert's inheritance at the end of the Azura Blood Road. Although they didn't know who the ultimate expert was or what level he had reached. Since he could form a secret domain like the Azura Blood Road, he must be an ultimate expert. Therefore, all the cultivators wanted to obtain the ultimate expert's inheritance and reach the top in one step. And now, there was no doubt that the blood-colored palace was where the ultimate expert's inheritance was. However, before the cultivators could rejoice, the blood demons that covered the sky were enough to make them tremble in fear. Yi Tsangyue and Wan temporarily restrained their desire to compete. Under such circumstances, it was impossible for them to determine a victor. That inheritance is indeed real. Yi Tsangshan's eyes flashed with excitement for the first time when he saw the palace floating in the Blood Sea. It was exactly the same as the ultimate expert's inheritance that he had imagined. I must obtain his inheritance. If I obtain it, I will dominate the South Sky region's Heaven Pride's battlefield, Yi Tsangshan muttered to himself. A great battle broke out, and the blood demons and cultivators clashed. Let's go and find a way to enter the blood-colored palace, Duguchima said to Wan. Duguchima was determined to obtain the ultimate expert's inheritance. Only by obtaining the inheritance would Duguchima have the confidence to face the Heaven Pride's battlefield. Princess Luoho, Yuanhua, Yi Tsangshan, and the others also took action and rushed towards the blood-colored palace. Fairy Tsangyue, why don't we bury Wan and Duguchima in the blood-colored palace forever? Gu Xiaoyang suggested. Yi Tsangyue hesitated for a moment, then nodded. All the Heaven Prides rushed towards the blood-colored palace. The blood demons also slaughtered the cultivators wantonly, devouring Yuan explosion. Duguqiuma stretched out his hand, and a terrifying demonic light shot out, blasting an elite blood demon in front of him to pieces. Wana waved her hand, her true chi bursting forth. Her cultivation had also reached the 6th layer of the divine dwelling realm. Next, it would be a process of elimination. Only the strongest prodigies would be able to kill countless blood demons and break out of the encirclement. If Yi Songyue and Gu Xiaoyang joined forces, they would naturally be able to break through. Duguqiuma and Waner together were also very powerful. Their speed was not slower than Yi Songyue and Gu Xiaoyang. Yi Songshan wielded the demon edge sword and revealed his strength for the first time. He had also reached the 6th layer of the divine dwelling realm, causing Yi Songyue, Gu Xiaoyang and Wan to raise their eyebrows. At the same time, they seemed to have thought of something and guessed Yi Songshan's background. Who exactly is that Yi Songshan? Duguqiuma asked. If I'm not wrong, he might have come from there. Waner's tone was unusually serious. But Duguqiuma asked. The Dark World. Waner did not hide anything and said directly. The Dark World. Duguqiuma's eyes lit up. He had inherited all of Yi Guchen's memories, so he had naturally heard of this name. When he was still in the Saint Origin Empire, Shui Yiqing had mentioned it. If he had the chance in the future, he could come to the Dark World to look for Shui, the heaven-weeping witch, Ji Ruqiang's. What kind of existence is the Dark World? Duguqiuma murmured. If you participate in the Heaven Pride battlefield, you may understand, Waner said. The Heaven Pride battlefield, could it be? Duguqiuma seemed to have thought of something. Princess Luo Ho, Yuan Hua and the others also charged out of the encirclement. After a bloody massacre, only 7 people managed to reach the blood-colored palace. Yi Songyue, Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Tangshan, Yuan Hua, Princess Luo Ho, Duguqiuma and Waner. The other experts were either killed by the blood demons or gave up and fled because they could not resist. However, to everyone's surprise, the blood demons did not chase after Duguqiuma and the others after approaching the blood-colored palace. It was as if there was something in the blood-colored palace that made the blood demons respect and fear it. Next, the 7 of them stepped into the palace while being wary of each other. The entire palace was filled with the smell of blood. The murals all around seemed to be engraved with azure hell. A river of the underworld flowed with countless blood and corpses. It was eternal hell. It really is that person? Yi Songshan glanced at the murals. He could not hide his joy. Duguqiuma noticed the subtle change in Yi Songshan's expression. Does he know something? Duguqiuma murmured inwardly. After 15 minutes, the 7 of them gradually went into the deepest part of the blood-colored palace. The deeper they went, the more Duguqiuma and the others could feel a strange heartbeat. It was like a pulse that could not stop beating. The ripples were like the beating of a drum, making everyone feel very oppressed and uncomfortable. Why do I feel like I'm hearing a heartbeat? Waner also felt rather uncomfortable. Yi Songyue, Gu Xiaoyang, and the others were the same. They felt their chests tighten as if they could not breathe. It was like they were being suppressed. Only Duguqiuma felt the least out of the 7 of them. This was because he did not have a heart at all. His heart was only a longevity wood core. As a result, Duguqiuma was the only one who was not affected at all. However, even so, Duguqiuma pretended to frown. He looked like he was being suppressed like everyone else. At this moment, the path ahead came to an end. At the end of the palace was an extremely viscous pool of blood. A blood-red gemstone floated above the pool. Viscous azure blood continuously flowed out from the blood-red gem. The strange heartbeat also came from the blood-red gem. The 7 of them looked at the gemstone at the same time. Could the source of the azure blood be that blood-red gem? Duguqiuma's eyes shone brightly. Without the slightest hesitation, the 7 people present flashed at almost the same time and rushed towards the blood-red gem. However, just as they were about to reach the pool of blood, the entire pool of blood suddenly began to churn. Accompanied by an earth-shattering hiss, a blood-red behemoth broke out of the pool of blood. It was a blood demon, but it was much larger than an ordinary blood demon. It was more than 10 feet tall and had 6 arms with sharp blades. It looked more like some kind of arthropod insect and was extremely ugly and ferocious. Its ferocious fiendish aura also far surpassed that of a golden blood demon. The pressure it emitted was at least at the 8th level of the divine dwelling realm. Could that be the king of blood demons? Princess Luoho and the others exclaimed. The king of blood demons was the strongest existence among the blood demons. Princess Luoho had only heard of it. It was her first time seeing it. Who would have thought that such a ferocious king of blood demons would be standing in front of the final opportunity? For a moment, the 7 of them wore grave expressions. Chapter 1184. The king of blood demons was comparable to an expert at the 8th layer of the divine dwelling realm. In addition, the blood demons had a special structure, an extremely powerful physical body, and 6 sharp arms. It could be said that even a venerable expert wouldn't be able to do anything to the king of blood demons in a short period of time. Moreover, venerable-level experts couldn't enter the Azura Blood Road. It was no wonder that no one had been able to obtain the inheritance of the strongest expert in the deepest part of the Azura Blood Road. As soon as the king of blood demons appeared, it emitted a monstrous blood aura and stared fiercely at the 7 people present. At this moment, even the heaven prides of overlord forces like Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Songyue and Waner were frowning, feeling very troubled. Princess Luoho and the others looked even more solemn. Everyone, I think that no matter what kind of grudges and hatred we have, the most important thing now is to deal with the king of blood demons. Otherwise, let alone fighting for the opportunity, we may even be killed by it, said Gu Xiaoyang. That's right. Princess Luoho agreed. She also wanted to know what the most precious opportunity in the depths of the Azura Blood Road was. Wana, what do you think? Gu Xiaoyang looked at Waner, not caring about Duguqiuma. He didn't care about a person who hadn't even reached the divine dwelling stage, even if he was a demon emperor. Waner also thinks so. What do you think, Sister Zhongyue? Waner looked at Yi Zhongyue with a smile. Yi Zhongyue's face remained cold and indifferent. She frowned slightly, not happy to join forces with Waner and Duguqiuma, but still nodded. Because it wasn't the time to determine the winner between her and Waner. I think you won't refuse, right? Gu Xiaoyang looked at Yuan Hua and the others. Yuan Hua's face darkened. Gu Xiaoyang's tone was obviously arrogant and bossy. However, he was a heaven pride of the empire and was weaker than the heaven prides of the overlord forces. Yuan Hua unwillingly glanced at Duguqiuma, but still nodded in agreement and temporarily suppressed his killing intent. The discussion seemed to take a long time, but in fact it only took a dozen breaths. The king of blood demons roared, and its 6 sharp arms pierced through the air towards the 7 people present. Everyone attack together. Gu Xiaoyang shouted as if he had become the leader. With his status as one of the 10 great young masters, he indeed had the right to do so. Duguqiuma did not care. He should deal with the blood demon king first. Soon after, a great battle broke out. Duguqiuma and the others attacked at the same time. One had to admit that none of the geniuses who could stand out and fight their way into the blood-colored palace were weak. Yuan Hua waved his black gold halberd, sending halberd radiance into the sky. Princess Luoho slashed down with the scythe of the death god, and the scythe shone like a black moon. The demonic edgesword in Yi Zhongshan's hand vibrated and streaks of sword light shot out. On the other hand, Gu Xiaoyang was still calm as he held the Daluo star seal in his hand and crushed over. Yi Zhongyue and Wan Er also used their own divine abilities. Neither of them wanted to be weaker than the other. Duguqiuma also made his move, but he held back and did not use his full strength. The 7 sky prides were engaged in a chaotic battle with the king of the blood demons. Among them were 3 sky prides from overlords and a mysterious Yi Zhongshan. Even though the blood demon king's force was close to the supremacy level, he could only contend with the 7 geniuses and could not kill them. This made the blood demon king furious, and his attacks became even fiercer. Everyone, if we continue to hold back, none of us will get that opportunity, Gu Xiaoyang said in a deep voice. Wan Er smiled and said, Mr. Gu, since you're so good at talking, why don't you set an example first? Gu Xiaoyang nodded without hesitation. Then he used his fingers as a sword and pointed in the air. 7 stars illusion, unsheathe. As soon as he said that, a silver longsword shot out. The blade was like mercury and shone with 7 stars, forming the shape of the Big Dipper. This was Gu Xiaoyang's sword, the 7 stars illusion. However, the 7 stars illusion had already reached the level of a tribulation divine weapon. Like the 9 dragon thunder prison, it was a 10th tribulation divine weapon. His sword has also transformed into a 10th tribulation divine weapon. Dugu Qiuma saw this. He remembered the battle between Gu Xiaoyang and Yi Guqin in the Tianhuang Plains. At that time, Gu Xiaoyang's 7 stars illusion was only a quasi-tribulation divine weapon. It seemed that during this time, not only did Gu Xiaoyang's cultivation not lag behind, but even his sword had also transformed. 1,000 Stars Pilgrimage Sword Technique. Gu Xiaoyang held the 7 stars manifest god and slashed out. Tens of thousands of sword lights emerged like a river of stars. Each sword light was extremely sharp and pierced towards the Blood Devil King like a meteor shower. Even one, had a serious look in her eyes. Gu Xiaoyang's strength was one of the best among the Overlord Force's Sky Prides. Otherwise, he would not be ranked 9th on the Dragon Phoenix list. Seeing Gu Xiaoyang make a move, the others also began to use their own methods. Under such bombardment, even the tough shell on the Blood Demon King's body began to crack, and countless wounds appeared. Finally, with a roar, it exploded into countless pieces of blood foam. Just as the King of Blood Devils fell, Yi Zichen's eyes lit up. The eyes of the 7 Sky Prides lit up, and they immediately charged toward the blood-colored gem. No one can stop me, young Master Xingyun. Gu Xiaoyang used the 1,000 Stars Pilgrimage Sword Technique again. A turbulent sea of stars appeared, and countless sword chi spread out in all directions. You live up to your reputation as one of the top 10 young masters, but that's all you've got. Yi Zongshan smiled faintly, and his true chi surged into the demonic edge sword. He slashed out with his sword, and the sword shadow turned into a black stream of light that swept out. Sword shadow, demonic flow. Kaboom! The void trembled, and sword rays shot out in all directions. This move actually ended in a draw. For you. Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened. Anyway, we're in the Sky Pride's battlefield, and we'll meet sooner or later. Why do I have to say it now? Yi Zongshan smiled faintly. You're from the Dark World? Yi Zongyue frowned. Yi Zongshan laughed but did not say anything. I don't want to give up on this opportunity either. Wanwer giggled and waved her hand. The most powerful martial technique of the extermination demonic sect, the Tua Luo extermination light, appeared and swept forward. It could be said that after the Blood Demon King died, everyone began to use all their means to fight for the greatest opportunity in the Azura Bloody Road. Just as everyone was fighting intensely, the sound of a heartbeat came from the blood-colored gem again. The power of the heartbeat seemed to have resonated with the gem. Apart from Dugu Qiuma, everyone's heart trembled, and they spat out a mouthful of blood. Their strength was greatly suppressed. How can this be? Gu Xiaoyang's face froze. Just the sound of a heartbeat was enough to make Sky Prides like them spit out blood. Just how powerful was that supreme expert? Just as everyone was shocked in their hearts, a figure charged towards the blood-colored gem with lightning speed. It was Dugu Qiuma. Chapter 1185. Damn it! Seeing Dugu Qiuma rush towards the blood-red gem, Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Zongshan, and Yuan Hu's faces darkened. The heartbeat from the blood-red gem had caught them off guard and injured them. Their strength was suppressed, and their speed was slowed down. However, they could not understand why Dugu Qiuma was immune to the heartbeat. They did not know that Dugu Qiuma did not have a real heart, so he would not be affected. In the end, this opportunity still belongs to me. Dugu Qiuma's eyes shone brightly. Once he obtained this opportunity, he would be able to better help his original body, Yi Guqin, to deal with the upcoming battles. However, just as Dugu Qiuma's hand was about to grab the blood-red gem, a sword tore through the air and stabbed towards Dugu Qiuma's heart. Young Master Dugu, be careful. Wanda's face under the veil paled slightly when she saw this. It was not because she was worried about Duguchioma. It was because Duguchioma was a demonic emperor phenomenon. If he died like this, it would be a great loss to the demonic extermination sect. Duguchioma turned his head and saw that the person holding the sword was Yi Tsangyue. A strange light appeared on Yi Tsangyue's body like a full moon. It covered her body and made her look like a fairy from the Moon Palace. It made her look even more beautiful. Immortal divine fetus. Duguchioma immediately reacted. Why was Yi Tsangyue immune to the heartbeat suppression? It was because the immortal divine fetus protected Yi Tsangyue. At that moment, Yi Tsangyue stabbed her sword towards Duguchioma's left chest. If Duguchioma continued to snatch the blood-red gem, his chest would undoubtedly be pierced through by the sword. If he gave up, it would be very difficult for Dugu and Chioma to fight for it after Gu Xiaoyang and the others recovered. Perhaps this is a choice of life and death to others, but it's nothing to me. Dugu Xiaomo laughed coldly. He ignored Yi Tsangyue's attack and grabbed the blood-red gem instead. At the same time, Yi Tsangyue's sword pierced through Dugu Chioma's chest. Idiot! Gu Xiaoyang sneered. In his opinion, disregarding one's life to fight for a fortuitous encounter was undoubtedly foolish to the extreme. No! Wanner cried out. It had not been easy for them to find a demon emperor phenomenon user, but he had fallen at Yi Tsangyue's hands just like that. With his heart pierced through, no one would think that Dugu would be able to survive. You call yourself a fairy, but your resolute methods aren't much worse than the witches. Dugu Chioma's lips curled into a cold smile. Yi Tsangyue was slightly surprised to see Dugu Chioma so calm despite knowing that he was going to die. You were born to bring blood and slaughter. Instead of becoming a demon your entire life, it's better to be free now, Yi Tsangyue said nonchalantly. Hee hee, what a good way to be free. Dugu Chioma shook his head. Then, he suddenly realized that the blood-red gem in his hand was as fragile as glass. He crushed it with just a little force. Then, a blood-red vortex appeared and sucked Dugu Chioma and Yi Tsangyue into it. Then, the vortex disappeared. What's going on, Fairy Tsangyue? Gu Xiaoyang was stunned and froze on the spot. Yi Tsangshan's face also darkened instantly. He finally understood that the blood-red gem was not a fortuitous encounter, but the key to it. Wanner, on the other hand, was in a daze. She had come here for nothing. Is he dead? Princess Luoxia muttered to herself. For some reason, she should have been happy, but she did not feel any joy. She even felt that it was unreal. Had the white-haired sword demon, who had been invincible since his rise, really died just like that? It's good that he died. Unfortunately, he didn't die under my halberd, Yuan Hua said coldly. The people outside had different emotions. Dugu Chioma and Yi Tsangyue were in a strange blood-red space. In this space, there was nothing else but the Yellow Springs blood river that flowed in a meandering manner. At the end of the blood river, a bright red heart was beating loudly. The strange heartbeat from before came from this heart. Thump, thump, every time the blood-red heart beat, it seemed to shake the void, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding space. Whose heart is that? Dugu Chioma's eyes were filled with doubt. You're not dead. Yi Tsangyue was shocked. Her sword was still in Dugu Chioma's chest. However, Dugu Chioma looked as if nothing had happened. There was not even a drop of blood. Tsangyue, you want to kill me just because I triggered the demon emperor descending to the ninth heaven vision. Is this the justice you speak of? Dugu Chioma placed his hand on the blade of Yi Tsangyue's sword and pulled it out inch by inch. Although his chest had been pierced, only wisps of black gas were emitted. Your heart isn't on the left. Yi Tsangyue suddenly realized. Sorry, I'll kill those who want me, Dugu Chioma, to die first. Dugu Chioma's eyes sharpened. He used the battle god demon body and the heaven-devouring secret skill at the same time. He used the god-devouring sword and swept it toward Yi Tsangyue. Originally, Dugu Chioma was hesitant about whether he should maintain a good relationship with Yi Tsangyue because she had the immortal divine embryo. This way, Yi Guchen's original body could obtain the innate indestructible sword embryo in the future. But now, Yi Tsangyue wanted to kill him completely. This touched Dugu Chioma's bottom line. No matter what, I'll suppress you first. Duguchumo used the demon 13 swords, and a pitch-black sword light shot out. Lee Songyue also attacked, and her sword moves were swift and fierce. As a Heaven's Pride of the Misty Sword Pavilion and a Grade 8 Heaven's Pride, Lee Songyue's strength was unquestionable. At the moment, the two of them couldn't care less about the Yellow Springs Blood River and the mysterious heart. When their moves collided, sparks flew and true chi shook. Your true strength isn't even at the divine dwelling stage, but you have such strength. You're indeed a demon emperor phenomenon. Lee Songyue was completely sure. So, you want to kill me to prevent me from being recruited by the Destruction Demon sect? Duguchumo sneered and continued to attack. If you didn't do evil, I wouldn't have done this. But you slaughtered 13 cities. Do you have any pity in your heart? Lee Songyue shouted coldly. Pity? Huh, so what if those overlord forces claim to be righteous? What about Gu Xiaoyang's character? Is he righteous? Duguchumo sneered. Justice had always been determined by the strong. Gu Xiaoyang was very strong, so everything he did was reasonable. Di Haotian was very strong, so it was reasonable for him to destroy the Su family and forcefully suppress Su Jianshi. No one would say that Di Haotian was a demon or an executioner. Moreover, although Duguchumo had slaughtered 13 cities, almost all of them were evil people. Duguchumo wasn't a madman who would kill anyone he saw. Duguchumo wouldn't kill innocent people. Lee Songyue had only seen one side, but she had already judged that Duguchumo was a demon king who couldn't be saved. No matter what, you'll only become a demon king if you're together with that witch. Lee Songyue shouted, and the power of the immortal divine embryo spread out again. The strange light instantly suppressed Duguchumo. Moreover, the light had the effect of restraining demonic chi, and Duguchumo felt as if he was imprisoned. Not good. Duguchumo raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect Lee Songyue's immortal divine embryo to be able to restrain demonic chi. Even the soul-devouring demon eye was affected. At that very moment, Lee Songyue's sword stabbed forward again, piercing through Duguchumo's right chest and the longevity wood core. In an instant, Duguchumo's life essence plummeted. Chapter 1186. This time, Lee Songyue's sword pierced through the longevity wood core in Duguchumo's right chest. The longevity wood core was the source of Duguchumo's life essence. Without the longevity wood core, Duguchumo would lose his source of life. Duguchumo's face darkened. Ever since he was refined by Yiguchen, he had been in a dangerous situation. This was the first time he had fallen into such a dangerous situation. I'm sorry, Duguchumo. The existence of a demon emperor phenomenon can only lead to endless slaughter and bloodshed. This may not be a bad ending for you. Lee Songyue's expression was cold. She did not look relaxed or happy. To her, this was just the completion of a mission. What a good ending. Unfortunately, I, Duguchumo, cannot be judged by just anyone. Not even you, Lee Songyue. Duguchumo clutched the wound in his right chest. Life essence leaked out continuously. Right now, there was only one way to survive, and that was the mysterious heart. Duguchumo's footsteps flashed as he turned around and charged toward the heart. Impossible! Lee Songyue moved gracefully and slashed down again, adding a new wound to Duguchumo's back. Duguchumo's body shook again. Black chi spread from his wound. His pure demon body showed signs of disintegration for the first time. This woman's immortal divine embryo is so powerful. It can perfectly restrain my demon body. Duguchumo's expression was cold. The immortal divine embryo's power seemed to be the most perfect, pure, and flawless power in the world. Demon chi happened to be the opposite of this power. Lee Songyue's cultivation was higher than Duguchumo's. Therefore, his pure demon body was completely restrained by the immortal divine embryo, as expected of the innate ability of a rank 8 prodigy. However, it's too easy for you to kill me, Duguchumo. Duguchumo's tenacity was not inferior to Yiguchen's. Devil chi leaked out of his body, but he still stubbornly charged towards the mysterious heart. I'm sorry, but your path ends here. Lee Songyue raised her sword. She used the Misty Sword Pavilion's ancestral sword art, the Misty Sword Art. The sword swept out, and the sword light spread out like a waterfall, sweeping towards Duguchiomo. Duguchioma's face changed. Just as he was about to go all out, a hoarse voice with a hint of coldness suddenly sounded. I can feel it. It's a move that makes me feel somewhat disgusted. This voice echoed throughout the blood-colored space. Then, a beam of bloody light shot out from the Yellow Springs Blood River and cancelled out Itsang-yue's sword light. Who is it? Itsang-yue was on guard. Dugu and Chioemo also looked around. A towering figure appeared above the mysterious heart. That figure was a middle-aged man wearing blood-colored Azura armor. His hands were behind his back, and there seemed to be a mountain of corpses and a sea of blood behind him. The Yellow Springs Blood River circled around him, giving him the aura of a ruler of hell. You are, Itsang-yue, and Duguchioma's eyes froze. Azura Saint King. The 4 words seemed to be able to suppress thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. A Saint King expert. Itsang-yue and Duguchioma's faces changed. A Saint King of a domain could shake mountains and rivers, and suppress the sun, moon, and stars. Even in the Nantian region, they were experts at the top of the pyramid. Even someone as strong as the proud divine region could kill 3 saints in a row at the half-step Saint King realm, shocking the world. One could only imagine how powerful a true Saint King would be. So, the inheritance of the supreme expert in the deepest part of the Azura Blood Road refers to this Azura Saint King, Duguchioma muttered to himself. At the same time, he also understood the origin of the Azura blood. It was the mysterious heart, the heart of the Azura Saint King. The heart of a Saint King expert had boundless energy. It was no wonder that Gu Xiaoyang and the others vomited blood and were injured when they heard the heartbeat. However, although Itsang-yue and Duguchioma were slightly surprised, they did not panic. This was because they could feel that the Azura Saint King before them was only a consciousness clone, and he did not have the power of a Saint King. The Misty Sword technique of the Misty Sword Pavilion is still so annoying. The Azura Saint King's eyes flashed coldly, as if he had recalled some unpleasant memories. Seeing this, Itsang-yue's face changed. Senior, do you have some grudges with the Misty Sword Pavilion? Ha! That old witch Jiamei is still alive, right? The Azura Saint King sneered. What? Itsang-yue's face changed. Jiamei was the previous pavilion master of the Misty Sword Pavilion. Her seniority and strength were frighteningly high. This Azura Saint King was actually someone from the same generation as Jiamei? This shocked Itsang-yue. On the other side, Duguchioma's eyes flashed as he said, Senior, if you have a grudge with the Misty Sword Pavilion, can you help this junior? This junior agrees to help senior deal with the Misty Sword Pavilion. Duguchioma did not want to die. He had to live. And this mysterious Azura Saint King's grudges with the Misty Sword Pavilion was the best place to start. Itsang-yue gritted her teeth. She did not expect Duguchioma to take advantage of this loophole. But you're a little interesting. The Azura Saint King turned to look at Duguchioma. There was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Obviously, he also saw the uniqueness of Duguchioma's physique. Interesting. Is this the will of the heavens? It seems like the only person who can inherit my heart is you, said the Azura Saint King. When he was about to die, he accidentally came to the Mola dynasty and opened up the Azura Bloody Road. It was all to find his successor. However, after a long time, there was still no one who was qualified to inherit his legacy. And Duguchioma was the most suitable candidate to inherit the Azura Saint King's legacy. What? Itsang-yue's eyes changed. If the Azura Saint King helped Duguchioma, the situation would not be good. Kid, I'm from the Dark World. In the future, you must help the Dark World rise up, said the Azura Saint King. The Dark World again? Duguchioma said in his heart. Shui Iching from the Bloodthirst Tower brought Shui heir to the Dark World. The Demon Sword Emperor, Jiden, was also an expert from the Dark World. He had once killed countless people in the Nantian region. Yitsangshan, who was ranked first on the blood ranking, also came from the Dark World. And now, the Azura Saint King also came from the Dark World. What kind of existence was the Dark World? What did it have to do with the Nantian region? But now, Dugu did not think too much. He could only agree. Seeing this, the Azura Saint King waved his hand. The beating heart turned into a blood-red stream of light and entered Dugu body, replacing the broken longevity wood core. In an instant, Dugu felt a terrifying blood energy spread out, as if it was going to burst his pure demon body. Seeing this, the Azura Saint King pointed with his finger. Sealed. The boundless power in the heart was immediately sealed by more than half. On the other side, Yi Songyue could only watch and could not interfere. She did not expect the situation to turn out this way. However, just as Dugu body began to merge with the heart, the Azura Saint King's gaze fell on Yi Songyue with an inexplicable meaning. Yi Songyue suddenly felt a sense of danger. With my identity, I won't do anything to a junior like you. However, the special power in your body can better allow that kid to merge with my heart, so, the Azura Saint King smiled faintly. Yi Songyue's expression froze. Chapter 1187. How could she not understand the meaning behind the Azura Sage King's words? The power of the immortal divine embryo that she possessed was very helpful for Dugu to fuse with the Sage King's heart. Therefore, the Azura Sage King wanted to use a certain method to let Dugu be imbued with this power. As for what method it was, Yi Songyue did not dare to think about it. Senior, you're a Sage King expert. Are you going to make things difficult for a weak girl? Yi Songyue's body tensed up as she bit her lips with a serious expression. There are no weak girls in the Misty Sword Pavilion. Moreover, you almost killed this brat just now. This is considered compensation. The Azura Sage King raised his hand as he spoke. A ball of blood spurted out from the yellow spring blood river and condensed into a blood-red ribbon that bound Yi Songyue. Even though the Azura Sage King had already fallen, he was not someone that Yi Songyue could resist. Soon, Yi Songyue was bound like a prey that fell into a spider's web. Senior, Dugu eyes flashed as he did not understand what the Azura Sage King was trying to do. A gentleman has the beauty to fulfill someone's wish. Although I'm not a gentleman, it's not bad to have a beautiful marriage after my death. The Azura Sage King smiled faintly. What? Songyue's mind shook violently, and her face that was as cold as frost became as pale as paper. She understood the meaning behind the Azura Sage King's words. He wanted to use a special method to make her and Dugu fuse together. Yi Songyue's usually cold and beautiful face was in a mess as her heart was in turmoil. Dugu did not say anything as he was trying his best to fuse with the Azura Sage King's heart. However, he had heard the Azura Sage King's words. Yi Songyue, it seems like there's still some karma between us, Dugu muttered. The innate sword embryo and the immortal divine embryo had some kind of karmic connection after all. Although it was not Yi Guchen's true body, Dugu was no different from Yi Guchen. They shared a consciousness and soul. In the future, they would have the ability to fuse together and transform into their strongest form. Therefore, the union between Yi Songyue and Dugu was, in a way, a union with Yi Guchen. No. How could this be? Songyue's genuine qi burst forth, and the power of the immortal divine embryo was pushed to the extreme. She wanted to break free from the blood-colored ribbon, but it was in vain. It's best if you don't put up any unnecessary resistance. The Azura Saint King smiled faintly. Even though she was only left with a subconscious clone, a sacred king was still a sacred king. Yi Songyue was still powerless to resist. Then, the Azura Saint King sent 2 balls of blood-red light into Yi Songyue and Dugu bodies. Instantly, Songyue felt her entire body heat up, and her snow-white skin was flushed red. Her eyes, which were originally as cold as the moon, gradually became a little dazed. However, she still gritted her teeth and persevered, as expected of a disciple of the Misty Sword Pavilion. The Azura Saint King shook his head and snapped his fingers. A mysterious force seemed to be boiling in Yi Songyue's delicate body, causing her to be dazzled. She flew straight towards Dugu. A pair of slender snow-white arms wrapped around Dugu neck. Although Dugu was also hit by the Azura Saint King's blood-red light, His perverted willpower was so strong that it did not affect him too much. Looking at Sangye, who was chasing after him and piercing through his chest, at this moment, she was like a thirsty woman, yearning for him. Duguchuma could not help but sigh. Every dog has its day. Seeing that Duguchuma did not do anything, the Azura Saint King raised his eyebrows slightly and said, "Why? Don't tell me that you want to be a gentleman. Wouldn't that be too boring?" The Azura Saint King did not like hypocrites and moralists. Duguchuma smiled and said, "Senior, you've misunderstood. In this woman's eyes I, Duguchuma, am already an unpardonable villain. If that's the case, why should I be an unperturbed Lu Xiaohui?" Duguchuma's lips curled into a sinister sneer. If it was Yi Guchen himself, he might still be able to uphold the etiquette of a gentleman. However, Duguchuma was the other side of Yi Guchen. He was the incarnation of a demon. As a demon, if he were to be timid and overcautious, he would not have the demeanor of a demon. Since Yi Zhangyue believed that Duguchuma was destined to become an unparalleled demon king, then Duguchuma might as well become an unparalleled demon king. "Ha, you've inherited my Saint King's heart. Don't disappoint me." The Azura Saint King waved his hand, and blood-red light surged from the Yellow Springs Blood River, turning into a blood-red ball of light that enveloped Yi Zhangyue and Duguchuma. Within the blood-red ball of light, Yi Zhangyue was delirious, but she still retained a trace of her consciousness. A teardrop fell from her misty eyes. It contrasted with the mole at the corner of her left eye, adding a touch of poignant beauty. "Duguchuma, if you really harm my body, I, Zhangyue, will never let you off." Yi Zhangyue sobbed. She was the ethereal sword pavilion's fairy Zhangyue, an immortal. Duguchuma was a demon that attracted the demon emperor to the 9 heavens. Immortals and demons were destined to be enemies, just like her and which one. However, Zhangyue did not expect one or to be right. The immortal and the demon king were about to be together. Don't worry. I, Duguchuma, will accompany you to the end." Duguchuma laughed heartily. He would accompany you to the end. That was Duguchuma's promise. Yi Zhangyue's last trace of consciousness was completely lost. The two of them hugged each other. Outside, the Azura Sage King muttered to himself, "This kid is really mysterious. Even I can't see through him. Is he the turning point of the Dark World? The 3 hidden forces and the various overlords, just you wait. The Dark World's counterattack is coming." The Azura Sage King's eyes were cold. Time passed. After an unknown period of time, the blood-red ball of light dissipated, revealing 2 figures. Duguchuma was dressed in black. His white hair fluttered in the wind, and his vitality was as vigorous as a dragon's. As for Yi Zhangyue, she was exhausted and had fainted. Duguchuma helped her put on a moon-white robe. "How is it? Are you satisfied with this opportunity?" The Azura Sage King smiled. "Thank you, Senior." Duguchuma cupped his fists. The heart of the Sage King had completely replaced the longevity wood core and became Duguchuma's heart. Because of the heart of the Azura Sage King, his body had completely turned into a body of flesh and blood. He could bleed and was no longer like before, where he only emitted black gas. At the same time, Duguchuma's battle god demonic body had also reached the 3rd refinement stage. His cultivation base had also broken through to the 3rd firmament of the divine dwelling realm by relying on the heart of the Sage King and the power of Yi Zhangyue's immortal divine embryo. Moreover, his divine dwelling was no ordinary divine dwelling. It was blood-red. The blood-red divine dwelling was called the Azura divine dwelling, and it was also a flawless divine dwelling. It also had the ability to turn ordinary true qi into blood-red Azura true qi. The blood-red Azura true qi was more lethal than ordinary true qi. It could be said that the heart of the Azura Sage King had caused a qualitative change in Duguchuma's strength. But that was not all. The Azura Sage King had left a great opportunity here, and he wanted to pass it on to Duguchuma. Chapter 1188. Not bad. Looks like you've perfectly fused with my heart. However, there's another opportunity here that's even more valuable than my heart, said the Azura Saint King. The greatest opportunity. Duguchuma was slightly stunned as he stared at the yellow spring blood river. Could it be? That's right. It's this yellow spring blood river. Do you know what this yellow spring blood river is? Asked the Azura Saint King. I don't know, Duguchuma said honestly. The Saint King realm was too far away from him. Duguchuma could not understand the Azura Saint King's methods. The Azura Saint King was not surprised. There are 9 levels of heaven's tribulation. The 1st to 3rd levels are heaven's tribulation saints, while the 4th and 6th levels are realm's saint kings. I'm a 4th level saint king, but do you know the difference between a saint and a saint king? Duguchuma shook his head. So far, whether it was him or Yiguchin, the strongest person they had met was the half-step saint king of the proud divine continent. The proud divine continent was still half a step away from the saint king realm, so Duguchuma did not know the secret of the saint king. The Azura Saint King continued, Saint Kings are also known as realms saint kings. The biggest difference between them and a saint is that they can condense a realm and use the realm's power to suppress everything. Realm's power? Duguchuma raised his eyebrows. Next, the Azura Saint King gave a general explanation. If heaven's tribulation saints comprehended the power of laws, then realm's saint kings condensed the realm's power. When the soul palace and spiritual abode reached the peak, they would be refined and fused by the heaven's tribulation, and the 2 powers would become one. At this time, the combination of the spiritual abode and soul palace would create a special domain called a realm. Powerhouses who comprehended different nomological powers would condense different bounded domains. For example, the Azura Saint King's realm was called the Yellow Spring Blood River, which was the blood-red river that Duguchuma saw. It could be said that the Yellow Spring Blood River was the Azura Saint King's greatest legacy. I see. In that case, there are some similarities between the realm domain and the sword Dao domain. Dugu asked. It is indeed similar, but there is still a fundamental difference between the two. The sword way domain can only be expanded with the way of the sword, while any Saint King expert has their own domain, said the Azura Saint King. Duguchuma nodded. If that was the case, then the value of the Yellow Springs Blood River was indeed immeasurable. Now, he finally understood why Yitzhangshan had been so eager to obtain the legacy. Clearly, Yitzhangshan and the Azura Saint King both came from the Dark World. It was understandable that he wanted the Azura Saint King's inheritance. If you've decided, I'll condense this realm and hand it over to you, the Azura Sage King said. But I don't want to walk the path of my predecessors. Dugu hesitated. If he inherited the Azura Saint King's bounded domain, would he be able to condense his own bounded domain when he became a Saint King in the future? Oh, are you going to reject me? The Azura Saint King narrowed his eyes. A terrifying pressure poured down on Duguchuma. One could imagine the pressure of a Saint King expert. Even if it was just a consciousness clone, it was definitely not something that a divine dwelling expert could contend against. But Duguchuma's expression did not change. He said in a deep voice, If Senior's Yellow Springs Blood River blocks my path, then I won't accept it. He looked at the young man who was still calm and composed under his pressure. The Azura Saint King was taken aback at first, but then he suddenly laughed. The pressure also dissipated into nothingness. I didn't misjudge you. Don't worry, the Yellow Springs Blood River won't affect your path in the future, said the Azura Saint King. Thank you, Senior. Duguchuma said. The Azura Saint King raised his hand. In the blood-red space, the entire Yellow Springs Blood River suddenly surged. It then shrank and condensed into a ball of viscous liquid the size of a fist. It directly entered Duguchuma's dantian. The Yellow Springs Blood River had various means of sealing, suppressing, refining, and attacking. This was the strongest manifestation of the Azura Sage King's law power. With Duguchuma's current realm, it was difficult for him to unleash even 1% of the Yellow Springs Blood River's power. But even so, the Yellow Springs Blood River was enough to be Dugu's trump card. Since you have inherited my legacy, you are my successor. If you have the chance in the future, you can go to the Azura domain in the Dark World. Keep this Azura Lord token. As the Azura Sage King spoke, he took out a blood-colored token. Dugu begged the demon to accept it. He didn't know where the world of darkness was, nor did he know where the Azura territory was. However, it wouldn't be too late to consider such matters in the future. Alright, this matter is concluded. Now, the entire Azura Blood Road will no longer exist. You can all leave. The Azura Saint King waved his hand. Now that he had found a successor, one of his wishes had been fulfilled. After that, the Azura Saint King's consciousness clone faded into the void. Thank you, Senior. Dugu cupped his hands slightly. This trip to the Azura Blood Road could be said to be a fruitful one. Although the longevity wood core was broken, he had obtained an even more powerful heart of the Saint King. It had also transformed his pure demon body into a real body of flesh and blood. Of course, he was immune to most poisons and pain and other abilities. My original body has the ancient god's heart, and I have the Azura Saint King's heart. Interesting. Dugu Chioma chuckled. However, his gains were not only that. His cultivation had directly broken through to the third heaven of the divine dwelling realm. His battle god demon body had also broken through to the third revolution. The divine dwelling was also a flawless blood-colored Azura divine dwelling that could condense Azura true chi. More importantly, he had obtained the Azura Saint King's realm and the inheritance of the Yellow Springs Blood River. Of course, Dugu Chioma didn't forget that the most important things he had obtained weren't these. Dugu Chioma turned his gaze to Itsang-yue, who was still unconscious. Even in a coma, Itsang-yue's face was so beautiful that it was soul-stirring. Her face, which was originally as cold as frost, was now flushed red. There seemed to be a few drops of tears hanging from her long eyelashes, which set off the mole at the corner of her eye. It made Itsang-yue look even more delicate and delicate. Dugu Chioma indifferently walked forward, his indifferent eyes containing a wisp of extremely complicated emotions. He didn't have too many feelings. This was because he had inherited Yiguchen's heavenly fiend fate. Therefore, he was destined to be lonely. It was because of this that Dugu Chioma had told Qingqing not to have any feelings for him. In the end, she would only feel sad. However, Dugu Chioma didn't expect that he would develop such an ill-fated relationship with Itsang-yue. Just as Dugu Chioma was sighing inwardly, Itsang-yue suddenly opened her cold moon-like eyes, which were filled with shame, despair, and resentment. Itsang-yue suddenly lunged forward, thrusting her sword towards Dugu Chioma's heart. Just as the tip of her sword was about to pierce through, Dugu Chioma stretched out his hand and grabbed the tip of Itsang-yue's sword. You! Itsang-yue's expression changed. Do you think that I will just stand there and let you stab me to make up for the guilt in my heart? Sorry, Dugu Chioma, am not that kind of person. Chapter 1189. Dugu's tone was as cold as ice. Itsang-yue's expression changed. Previously, Yiguchen had willingly allowed Sidu Hongxue to stab him in the heart in order to make up for the guilt in his heart. But Dugu Chioma was not that kind of person. He would not sacrifice his own interests for a mere woman. Even if this woman was extremely beautiful and had the reputation of a fairy. Dugu Chioma. Itsang-yue gritted her teeth so hard that they almost broke. The pain coming from her lower body made her feel as if it was unreal. Her virginity had been taken away by the white-haired sword demon in front of her. One should know that Itsang-yue was an 8th grade prodigy of the Misty Sword Pavilion and an existence on the Dragon Phoenix list. It was one thing for her to be strong, but the key point was that she was equally beautiful. She was known as Fairy Itsang-yue in the Nantian region. The number of young geniuses pursuing Itsang-yue was as numerous as the carps in the river. But Itsang-yue was cold and arrogant. She was focused on cultivation and did not speak to the opposite sex. Even an outstanding prodigy like Gu Xiaoyang could not win Itsang-yue's heart even after pursuing her for a long time. And now, Itsang-yue's virginity had been taken away by Dugu Chioma. Itsang-yue could not accept this at all. Boom! Itsang-yue released the aura of the 6th level of the Divine Dwelling Realm and activated the power of the immortal Divine Embryo. Suddenly, a round and flawless brilliance appeared and suppressed Dugu Chioma. Previously, Itsang-yue had used the power of the immortal Divine Embryo to force Dugu Chioma into a desperate situation. But now, Dugu Chilmo released the power of the third level of the Divine Dwelling realm. Together with the blood-colored Azura Divine Dwelling, he was no weaker than Yi Tsangyu. Moreover, his heart was the heart of the Azura Sage King. Even if the Sage King's heart had most of its power sealed, it was enough to provide Dugu Chilmo with powerful energy. Dugu Chilmo smiled and said, Isongyue, things are different now. Even if you activate the power of the immortal divine embryo, you will not be able to suppress me. His cultivation level had skyrocketed, and his pure demonic body had also transformed. Naturally, he would not be restrained by the immortal divine embryo like before. Just as the two of them were fighting endlessly, the entire blood-red space began to tremble and crack. This place is about to collapse. Dugu pleaded. Not only this space, but the entire Azura Blood Road would soon collapse. Dugu have said that I will never let you off. Songyue bit her lips so hard that they almost broke. Ah, to have such a beautiful fairy follow me for all eternity, I, Dugu, am not qualified to beg the devil. Dugu smiled, not minding it at all. A blood-red vortex appeared beside them and swallowed them up. At the same time, in the Scarlet Palace, Yi Zongshan, Gu Xiaoyang, and the others all had ugly expressions. They knew that the blood-red gem was the key to the true opportunity. However, he missed them by a wide margin. In addition, Gu Xiaoyang was worried about Yi Zongyue's condition. Although he had seen Yi Zongyue's sword pierce through Dugu Chilmo's chest, he was still shocked. But for some reason, Gu Xiaoyang felt restless and uneasy. Princess Luoho, on the other hand, had an indescribable feeling. She should have felt relieved that Dugu Chilmo was dead. However, that was not the case in reality. Yuan Hua was the only one who felt relieved. On the other hand, the witch was the opposite. Her face, which was covered by a black veil, was extremely cold and resentful. I've worked so hard for so long, but it's all in vain. Gritted her teeth angrily. She had spent so much time tracking the Demon Emperor phenomenon to the Mola dynasty. She had finally found Dugu Chilmo after much difficulty, but he had died in the end. One could only imagine how furious Wana was. However, at that moment, the entire Scarlet Palace suddenly shook. What's going on? The 5 people present were slightly shocked. Then, the void distorted, and a blood-red vortex appeared. 2 figures flashed out from the front and back. When Wan saw the 2 figures clearly, she covered her mouth and exclaimed in disbelief, Dugu Chilmo, you're still alive? The figure in front was Dugu Chilmo. How is that possible? Yuan Hua was also shocked. They had seen Yi Hongyue's sword pierce through Dugu Chilmo's chest with their own eyes. Logically speaking, Dugu Chilmo should not have survived. Princess Luoho was also surprised, but she secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Princess Luoho was surprised by her own emotions. On the other side, Yi Zongyue stared at Dugu Chilmo with her clear eyes. Her hand that was holding the sword was trembling slightly. However, she did not say anything. Fairy Zongyue, are you all right? Gu Xiaoyang went forward and asked with concern. When Dugu Chilmo saw this, he said indifferently, she's all right. She's just bleeding a little. What? You dared to hurt Fairy Zongyue? Gu Xiaoyang's face immediately darkened. However, when Yi Zongyue heard this, she was even more ashamed and angry. How could she not understand the meaning behind Dugu Chilmo's words? When Dugu Chilmo saw this, he shook his head lightly. If Gu Xiaoyang knew the cruel truth, how would he react? Although Dugu Chilmo did not have the confidence to kill Gu Xiaoyang, but he had defeated him in another aspect. By the way, I still need to find someone to spar with and measure my strength after the transformation, Dugu Chilmo thought. At this moment, a vigorous killing intent swept out again. It was Yuan Hua. Dugu Chilmo, you're really lucky. But this is also good. Killing you with my halberd will be the best revenge. Yuan Hua's voice was cold. His black hair fluttered in the wind as he held the black gold halberd in his hand. He originally regretted not being able to kill Dugu Chilmo with his own hands. But now, he finally had the opportunity. Since Yuan Hua wanted to die, Dugu Chilmo could only fulfill his wish. Kill! Yuan Hua erupted with the true qi of the fourth layer of the divine dwelling stage. The black gold halberd violently swept toward Dugu Chioma. I'm not the same as before. Dugu Chioma muttered to himself. Facing Yuan Hua, Dugu Chioma didn't even need to use the sky-devouring secret technique. He activated the blood-red Azura divine dwelling in his dantian, and blood-red true qi gushed out like a volcanic eruption. Blood qi filled the sky and shook the void. Although he was only at the third layer of the divine dwelling stage, the aura that erupted was no weaker than Yuan Hua's. How is it possible, your cultivation level? The moment Dugu Chioma's aura erupted, the expressions of several people, including Yuan Hua, changed. This time around, Dugu Chioma was not using a secret technique. Instead, he was truly using his own power. But Yuan Hua couldn't believe that Dugu Chioma could break through the divine dwelling stage in such a short time, and even soar to the third layer of the divine dwelling stage. He must have obtained the inheritance of that supreme expert. Yi Songshan's eyes suddenly turned fierce. Now, facing Yuan Hua's attack, Dugu Chioma's expression was indifferent. The third place on the blood ranking is nothing to me now. Dugu Chioma raised his hand and swung out the god-devouring sword. Blood-red Azura true qi poured into it. 100 feet long blood-red sword light slashed down like an Azura sword god, breaking the abyss with one sword. Chapter 1190. Dugu Chioma's strength had skyrocketed after he received the Azura Saint King's inheritance. His cultivation base was at the third level of the divine dwelling, and he had a flawless Azura divine dwelling. Dugu Chioma could contend against Yuan Hua without using the sky-devouring secret technique or other amplification techniques. Rumble! 100-foot-long blood-red sword light came crashing down like a blood moon. Yuan Hua brandished his black gold halberd and raised it horizontally. When the weapons collided, it was as if stars had exploded, bursting out violent blasts and sparks. The entire blood-red palace trembled violently, and cracks appeared in the void. The Azura blood path is about to collapse. Gu Xiaoyang and the others were startled. But they couldn't continue to stay here, so they could only temporarily withdraw from the blood-red palace. Yi Songyue glanced at Dugu Chioma, gritted her teeth, and also flashed out. I'll find out more about the opportunity from him later. Yi Songshan pondered for a moment, then also turned and left the blood-red palace. Dugu Chioma, do you need Wan'er to help you? War's eyes flashed. There's no need. You go out first and wait for me outside, Dugu Chioma said. Princess Luo Ho hesitated for a moment, staring at Dugu Chioma with her beautiful eyes under the mask. She bit her lips and said coldly, Dugu Chioma, I haven't settled the score between you and me. You can't die before that. Heh. Dugu Chioma chuckled and didn't say anything. In the blink of an eye, only Yuan Hua and Dugu Chioma were left in the trembling blood-red palace. Dugu Chioma, what opportunity did you obtain? Yuan Hua fixed his gaze on Dugu Chioma. He had fought with Dugu Chioma before, and although he didn't gain any advantage, he didn't feel that Dugu Chioma was strong. But now, Dugu Chioma seemed to have been reborn after coming out of that space, and his strength had soared several times. I will tell you, but only when you are about to die. Dugu Chioma laughed coldly. Arrogant. Yuan Hua's face was extremely cold. His black hair danced wildly as his genuine qi surged. As the strongest heaven's pride of Mystic Demon Palace and ranked third on the blood ranking, he had never been looked down upon like this. Heavenly Wasteland Slash. Yuan Hua held the black gold halberd with both hands and infused it with vigorous genuine qi. His halberd slashed down vertically, as if it could split the sky. Dugu Chioma's performed the Demon 13 swords again. The blood-colored sword rays crisscrossed and swept in all directions, forming a dense sword net that clashed with Yuan Hua's move. Boom, boom, boom. Continuous explosions rang out as the two of them collided with each other like meteors. Yuan Hua held the halberd in one hand and slashed down again. His other hand formed a seal and a black seal froze in the void. Then it pushed toward Dugu. Yuan devouring explosion. Dugu Chioma's reached out with one hand. Black demonic light exploded in the void, shattering the seal. At the same time, The God Devourer's sword blocked the attack of the black gold halberd. More cracks appeared on the blade of the black gold halberd. How could this be? Yuan Hua's eyes darkened again. Although his black gold halberd was a quasi-heavenly tribulation divine weapon, its material was extremely heavy and hard. Its sturdiness was comparable to a true heavenly tribulation divine weapon. However, he would never know that Dugu Chiumo's God Devourer sword was a primordial demonic sword. At this moment, Dugu Chiumo's activated the soul-devouring demonic eye again. A terrifying soul vibration power entered Yuan Hua's sea of consciousness. Although Yuan Hua's sea of consciousness wasn't weak, it was still affected. His soul force was affected as if it was about to boil. Cough. Yuan Hua snorted, feeling as if his head was about to explode. However, his willpower was still extraordinary. His sea of consciousness was also far stronger than ordinary heaven's prides, so he wouldn't be killed instantly. Dugu Chiumo's took this opportunity to perform another ultimate move. Great God Devouring Art. The power of devouring exploded, forming a black hole vortex above Dugu Chiumo's as if it wanted to devour everything. The Great God Devouring Art was also a martial art of the Soul Devourer clan, so its power was needless to say. After Dugu Chiumo's cultivation base improved, the power of the Great God Devouring Art also doubled. Many items in the collapsing blood-red palace were swallowed by the black hole and turned into dust. Even Yuan Hua couldn't control his body and was about to be sucked in. Demonic God Splitting Slash. Yuan Hua's true chi burst forth as he hurriedly performed his ultimate move. Phantoms of demonic gods appeared around him, and it was as if the god of war of the underworld had attacked. A terrifying aura surged out as if it wanted to destroy everything. The black gold halberd in his hand swept across the sky, accompanied by phantoms of demonic gods, and slashed at the black hole vortex formed by the Great God Devouring Art. Boom, a violent explosion reverberated in all directions, and powerful ripples of air directly overturned the roof of the blood-red palace. Yi Cangyue, Gu Xiaoyang, Yi Tangshan, Wan Er and Princess Luo Ho, who had left the blood-red palace, looked back with a trace of surprise. They didn't expect the shockwaves from the two's battle to be so intense. In the center of the battle, Yuan Hua kept retreating, coughing blood from the corner of his mouth, and his black gold armor was shattered in many places. As for Dugu Chiumo's, although he was also injured, it didn't hurt him at all. This was because Dugu Chiumo's had the Saint King's heart. What was contained within was the Azura blood that was filled with vitality and vitality. Therefore, as long as he wasn't fatally injured, beheaded, or destroyed, Dugu Chiumo's wouldn't die. Damn it! Yuan Hua's face was ferocious and unwilling. He didn't expect the white-haired sword demon, who he didn't take seriously before, to grow to a level that even he couldn't deal with. Final move, Blood Tears of Heaven. Yuan Hua patted his chest with one hand, and his heart's essence blood spurted onto the black gold halberd, causing the halberd's blade to be covered in a mournful bloody light. He swept out with the halberd, stirring up the surrounding space with a bloody chi wave. At the same time, Yuan Hua's other arm turned as black as ink almost instantly. It was Mystic Demon Palace's Emperor-level martial art, Black Sky Demon Hand. Yuan Hua performed the two ultimate moves at the same time, and their power was so overwhelming that the surrounding Azura blood sea started to surge violently. Seeing this, Dugu Chiumo's continued to perform the Demon 13 Swords. First move, Blood Kill. Second move, Vanishing Shadow. Third move, Burning Star. Fourth move, Moon Slashing. Fifth move, Eclipse. 5 swords were performed consecutively, and the sword light caused chaos in the world, collapsing the universe. But it wasn't over yet. Dugu Chiumo's performed the 6th move again. Devour Dusk. The sword light swept out, as if it could swallow the setting sun. Powerful sword chi swept out in all directions, causing the already unstable space of the Azura blood path to collapse. Boom! Indescribable shockwaves were produced, as if a nuclear bomb had exploded, and thick smoke rose. The violent shockwaves swept across the surrounding blood sea like a gale. Yi Cangyue, Wan Er, Gu Xiaoyang and the others, who had left the blood-colored palace, all turned their heads to watch, wanting to know the result. Chapter 1191. The Azura Blood Sea exploded, creating huge waves. After the Azura Saint King's consciousness dissipated, the blood demons also melted into the Blood Sea. Walala, the blood that had soared into the sky fell back into the Blood Sea, creating a dense blood-colored mist. The sound of coughing blood came from the bloody mist. Yuan Hua retreated hundreds of meters, his black and gold armor cracked and shattered. His body was covered with sword wounds and blood flowed freely. He was in a sorry state. His eyes were bloodshot, and his chin was dripping with blood. He stared at the figure in front of him. Dugu Chioma's figure appeared. His clothes were torn, especially his shoulder, which had been scratched by the black and gold halberd. His white bones could be seen clearly. However, Dugu Chioma did not seem to feel any pain. He looked at Yuan Hua indifferently. "No, I can't accept this." Again. Yuan Hua roared. All the blood vessels in his body exploded, and his chi and blood burned. Final move, reverse heaven and earth. Yuan Hua tried his best to make a last stand. It's just a futile effort. Before Yuan Hua's halberd could strike, Dugu Chioma rushed to Yuan Hua's side and said coldly, "What I have is the Sage King's inheritance." Dugu Chioma's cold murmur fell into Yuan Hua's ears. His face froze, and his eyes slowly widened. The Sage King's inheritance. This was definitely an opportunity that Yuan Hua could not imagine. The will to fight to the death that he had gathered was instantly extinguished. Puchi. Just as Yuan Hua was about to give up, the God Devourer's sword pierced through his chest. A terrifying devouring power erupted, instantly absorbing and refining Yuan Hua's chi and blood. The wounds on Dugu Chioma's body healed at a speed visible to the naked eye. Not far away, Hang Yue and the other four saw this scene and felt a chill in their hearts. Dugu Chioma's method was indeed a real demon. No, he was more like a demon than a demon. It's such a waste for him not to join destruction. One commented. After killing Yuan Hua, Dugu's score for Chiao Imo had undoubtedly reached the top of the leaderboard. However, Dugu Chioma didn't plunder Yuan Hua's Azura blood, because he already had the heart of the Azura Sage King. With this heart, he would have an endless supply of Azura blood. This was because the source of the Azura blood in the Moro dynasty was the heart of the Azura Saint King. Moreover, the Azura blood had been diluted many times over. Dugu Chioemo could already foresee what kind of monstrous waves would be stirred up in the outside world. After all, the two geniuses of Mystic Demon Palace had died at his hands. After killing Yuan Hua, Dugu Chioma also stepped through the Blood Sea to come here. He knew that things weren't over yet. Gu Xiang Yitangshan and the others were still eyeing him covetously. Tsk Diske. Dugu Chioma, one is curious about your fortuitous encounter. I asked Sister Tsang Yue, but she refused to tell me. One smiled when she saw Dugu Chioma arrive. Yi Tsang Yue's expression was a little unnatural as a layer of frost covered her face. Gu Xiaoyang also noticed that something was wrong with Yi Tsang Yue. However, his main focus was still on Dugu Chioma's fortuitous encounter. Enough chit-chat. Hand over your fortuitous encounter, Yi Tsangshan said coldly. He was straightforward. He came from the Dark World and was the young master of a huge force in the Dark World. He had found records about the Azura Sage King in an ancient book, which was why he came to the Moro dynasty to search. He finally confirmed that the inheritance might be in the depths of the Azura Blood Road. After searching for so long, how could Yi Tsangshan be willing to hand over the fortuitous encounter to someone else? Gu Xiaoyang also said coldly, hand over the fortuitous encounter. It's not something you can have. Gu Xiaoyang's attitude was cold and condescending. He was like an immortal overlooking an ant in the mortal world. Dugu Chioma's expression was extremely cold. Back then, Gu Xiaoyang had taken away Yi Guchen's Khanate sword embryo with such a condescending attitude. Later on in the Tianhuang Plains, he had also planted the soul spirit devouring parasite in Yi Guchen's Dantian with such a condescending attitude. Now, he still had such a condescending attitude. It was because he came from an overlord force that he could look down on Gu Xiaoyang. Gu Xiaoyang, actually, there's something I've always wanted to say to you. Dugu Chioma's lips curled into a cold arc as he tilted his head slightly. What? Gu Xiaoyang frowned slightly. Who do you think you are? One and the others were stunned when they heard those words. They looked at Dugu Qiuma in surprise. There weren't many people in the Nantian region who dared to speak to Gu Xiaoyang like that. It could be said that other than the one monarch, the 4 sovereigns, and the 10 princes, the other elites wouldn't dare to be so presumptuous in front of Gu Xiaoyang. Sure enough, after Dugu Qiuma's words left his mouth, Gu Xiaoyang's expression suddenly became gloomy. A terrifying storm of true energy spread out from his body, causing the surrounding stars to sparkle. It was as if a starry sky had appeared. From this, one could see how extraordinary Gu Xiaoyang was. Do you know who you're talking to? Gu Xiaoyang's face was as cold as ice. I know. A conceited, arrogant, and ignorant dead man, Dugu Qiuma said indifferently. He deserves to die. Gu Xiaoyang shouted coldly. Without saying anything else, he raised his hand and struck out the Daluo astral seal, which suppressed Dugu Qiuma. Dugu Qiuma also raised his hand and used the devouring energy explosion. The demonic light in the void exploded and collided with Gu Xiaoyang's Daluo astral seal. Seeing this, Yi Songyue also attacked. One giggled and said, Sister Songyue, don't you righteous cultivators hate bullying others with numbers? One waved her hand and shot out true qi to block Yi Songyue. On the other side, Yi Songshan raised his demonic edge sword and was about to attack Dugu Qiuma. However, a cold figure flashed and blocked in front of Yi Songshan. Princess Luoho? Yi Songshan was slightly stunned. Princess Luoho didn't seem to have anything to do with Dugu Qiuma, right? Furthermore, before the blood path opened, Dugu Qiuma seemed to have flirted with Princess Luoho. He saved my life before. Princess Luoho's eyes flickered under the mask. However, even she didn't believe this reason. Since when did Princess Luoho, who is known for being cruel and cold-blooded, know how to repay a debt of gratitude? Yi Songshan's face darkened. Although Princess Luoho couldn't defeat him, she could still hold him back. Moreover, if Princess Luoho unsealed her fate, she would be even more difficult to deal with. Yi Songshan might not be able to subdue her. Seeing Princess Luoho block someone for him, Dugu Qiuma was also a little surprised. However, Dugu Qiuma's most important enemy was right in front of him. Under my sword, you shall be executed. Gu Xiaoyang stretched out his hand and a beam of starlight shot out. It was the divine weapon of the 10 tribulations, the 7 stars illusionary god. He was determined to kill this guy who dared to offend him directly. Dugu Qiuma also released his killing intent. In the past, Yi Guqin had always been suppressed by Gu Xiaoyang. Even in the Tianhuang Plain, he had to use all his strength and use the Eye of the Void to barely fight back. But now, just Yi Guqin's clone, Dugu Qiuma, was enough to fight against Gu Xiaoyang. Not to mention Yi Guqin's own strength. Who could compare to such a speed of improvement? Gu Xiaoyang, your life is mine. Chapter 1192. Dugu Qiuma no longer suppressed the killing intent in his heart, and his fighting spirit blazed like a raging fire. It was a hatred that was engraved into his bones. It was the determination to kill his enemy. It could be said that all of Yi Guqin's grievances originated from Gu Xiaoyang. Therefore, Dugu Qiuma wanted to fight Yi Guqin on behalf of Yi Guqin. Boom! Dugu Qiuma activated the Azura Divine Residence, and blood-red Azura Qi gushed out from the Divine Residence, making Dugu Qiuma look like a blood-soaked Azura. Gu Xiaoyang, give me your life. Dugu Qiuma wielded the God Devourer sword, and his figure turned into a blood-red afterimage as he thrust his sword at Gu Xiaoyang. You're courting death. Gu Xiaoyang coldly roared. He didn't expect that a mere Empire Heaven Pride would dare to take the initiative to attack him. Gu Xiaoyang wielded the 7-star illusionary god and displayed the Emperor-level sword art of the Starry Sword Pavilion, the 1000-star pilgrimage sword art. The speed of his sword was extremely fast, and every ray of sword light froze in the void like a speck of starlight. In the end, Gu Xiaoyang struck out a total of 10,000 swords, which looked like a magnificent starry sky. But every speck of starlight contained terrifying sword qi that was enough to kill a divine-dwelling heaven pride. This thousand-star pilgrimage sword technique had been completely cultivated by Gu Xiaoyang to the perfection realm. Kill! Gu Xiaoyang swung his sword, and the starlight transformed into dense sword qi that burst out. The 10,000 specks of cold light arrived first, and then the sword was like a dragon. The 10,000 rays of starlight whistled as if they could shatter the earth. Dugu Qiuma gathered his Azura Qi and directly displayed the first 5 moves of the 13 demon swords. Blood Kill, Vanishing Shadow, Star Burn, Moon Slash, Sun Erode. The 5 swords were displayed at the same time, and sword light illuminated the world. This sword art originated from the demon sword Emperor Jitian, and its power was equally astonishing. Rumbling sounds shook the entire Azura Bloody Road, and the sword light illuminated the blood-red broken sky. The 2 swords collided, and the sound of metal piercing through stone and metal could be heard. Dugu Qiuemo felt a powerful impact sweeping over him, causing his arms to tremble slightly. As a heaven pride of the 6th layer of the divine dwelling, Gu Xiaoyang's strength was indeed extraordinary. However, Dugu was fearless in his pursuit of the devil. What's going on? Gu Xiaoyang was surprised. After the exchange of blows, although no cracks appeared on his 7 stars manifest god, it seemed to emit a mournful cry. His weapon is strange. Gu Xiaoyang narrowed his eyes. One had to know that Gu Xiaoyang's 7-star illusionary god was placed together with the famed sword of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion, the 7-star Dragon Abyss. Nourished by the famed primordial swords, the power of the 7 stars manifest god was far stronger than that of ordinary 10th tribulation divine weapons. But in this collision, his weapon was actually at a disadvantage. Dugu Qiuma was also surprised. However, he was surprised that Gu Xiaoyang's 10th tribulation divine weapon was so sturdy. He didn't know that Gu Xiaoyang's divine weapon had been nurtured by a real immemorial famed sword. It's a little strange, but you're too naive if you think you can rely on a divine weapon. Gu Xiaoyang brandished his sword while holding the Daluo astral seal in his hand. He pressed down on Dugu Qiuma's head, wanting to use a powerful method to kill Dugu Qiuma. Dugu Qiuma's expression was ice cold as he used the God Devourer sword to block the 7 stars manifest god. Shortly after, he extended his hand and terrifying demonic light exploded, directly shattering Gu Xiaoyang's Daluo star seal. If it was the previous Dugu Qiuma facing Gu Xiaoyang, he would at least be at an absolute disadvantage, if not directly suppressed. However, after evolving the Azura Divine Dwelling and reaching the 3rd layer of the Divine Dwelling, Dugu Qiuma was able to contend with Gu Xiaoyang and not be at a disadvantage. On the other side, who was entangled with Yang Yue, said in surprise, "Isn't his strength rising too fast?" Although Dugu Qiuma was strong before, it was impossible for him to contend with Gu Xiaoyang, one of the 10 great Gongzi. But now he could do it. Yi Songyue's face was covered with frost. Only she knew that Dugu Qiuma had obtained the inheritance of a sacred ruler expert. In addition, he possessed the demon emperor descending to the 9th heaven phenomenon. It was imaginable to what extent Dugu Qiuma would grow in the future. If he was nurtured by the demonic extermination sect, it was unimaginable what kind of waves Dugu Qiuma would cause in the South Horizon region. Therefore, the best outcome was naturally for Gu Xiaoyang to kill Dugu Qiuma while he was still in his infancy. But unfortunately, Dugu Qiuma, who had obtained the inheritance of a sacred ruler, wasn't someone that Gu Xiaoyang could kill. Evil origin puppet. Dugu Qiuma raised his hand and struck out a powerful move. A black shockwave swept towards Gu Xiaoyang. Seeing this, Gu Xiaoyang gathered the star true qi in his body and condensed it into a starry sky seal in his palm. It was even more powerful than the Daluo astral seal. Star Emperor seal. Gu Xiaoyang's aura rose. The starry sky seal pressed down as if it had the power to shatter mountains, rivers, sun, and moon. Dugu Qiuma's aura was locked down. He couldn't dodge at all. The ground around him collapsed at the same time. Dugu Qiuma's white hair fluttered. He also raised his hand and used the Great Devouring God technique. A black vortex appeared, as if it could swallow everything in the world. The Star Emperor's seal smashed into the black vortex and burst out with boundless waves, shattering the surrounding ground. Not far away, the Azura Blood Sea set off huge waves and washed the sky. Rumble. As if the stars had exploded, the shockwaves spread out and hit Gu Xiaoyang and Dugu Qiuma at the same time. Dugu Qiuma directly activated the third transformation battle god demonic body. Black demonic patterns spread on the surface of his body. His physical strength and defense instantly skyrocketed. The shockwave bombarded him, but it could only shake him. It couldn't hurt him. He stomped his foot on the ground and used imminent skyline. His figure instantly appeared in front of Gu Xiaoyang and slashed down with the god-devouring sword. Gu Xiaoyang blocked with his sword. With a clang, the two of them attacked with their swords so fast that they were like afterimages. Sparks and explosions continuously sounded. Yitangyue, one, and the others, who were fighting not far away, were shocked when they saw this. Yitzangshan also frowned slightly and muttered to himself, "I didn't expect him to have grown to such a level." Previously, Yitzangshan didn't think much of Dugu Qiuma and didn't take him seriously. But now, the combat strength that Dugu Qiuma displayed surprised him. Damn it! Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were extremely gloomy. He didn't expect Dugu Qiuma to be so difficult to deal with. Thinking of this, Gu Xiaoyang no longer held back and used his own sword principle. Vast sword intent spread out and seemed to turn his surroundings into a dazzling starry sky. However, this magnificent and vast starry sky contained fatal killing intent. It was Gu Xiaoyang's peerless star sword principle. Gu Xiaoyang raised his sword into the sky. Tens of thousands of sword lights flashed in the starry sky. Then, the stars shook and turned into boundless sword chi that swept toward Dugu Qiuma. Peerless star sword principle? Dugu Qiuma muttered to himself. In fact, his god-devouring sword also contained a creation-level sword principle, the devouring sword principle. However, Dugu Qiuma couldn't comprehend it for the time being. However, Dugu Qiuma could use the sword principle that Yi Guqin had comprehended. Chapter 1193. Dugu Qiuma raised his sword and a burst of sword intent spread around him. As the sword intent spread out, the blood-red sky seemed to be filled with rolling thunderclouds and thunder. It was the peerless lightning sword principle. In fact, the Azura sword principle was the most suitable for Dugu Qiuma's own power attribute. However, because his opponent was Gu Xiaoyang, it was inevitable that he would be confused and notice if he used the Azura sword principle. Therefore, Dugu Qiuma could only choose to use the lightning sword principle. Of course, the lightning sword principle was not inferior to the Azura sword principle in terms of explosive attack power. As Dugu Qiuma used the lightning sword principle, the God Devourer's sword also burst out with lightning. He swung his sword and the blazing lightning swept out like a torrent, colliding with Gu Xiaoyang's starry sword light. Lightning sword principle? Gu Xiaoyang's face darkened again. This dynasty's genius that he did not take seriously at the beginning had exceeded his expectations again and again. Seeing this, Gu Xiaoyang used his ultimate move again. The starry sword intent surged and turned into a dazzling river of stars in the sky. It was the starry sword principle's sword principle domain, starry river dazzling 9 heavens. Gu Xiaoyang held the 7 stars illusionary god and swung his sword down. The river of stars fell and the sword chi surged like a vast ocean. It was so powerful that it seemed to want to wash the entire Azura Blood Road. Dugu Qiuma was also unwilling to retreat and used the lightning sword principle's sword principle domain. Heaven's punishment thunder prison. Dugu Qiuma raised his sword with both hands and the power of lightning surged out, turning into a dazzling ball of lightning in the sky. Then, countless bolts of lightning swarmed out like dragons, wanting to imprison this part of the world and drown everything in the lightning. This was a huge collision between 2 peerless sword principle domains, and it burst out a huge wave. The Azura Blood Road mystic realm was already on the verge of collapsing. Because of this fierce collision, it began to crumble even faster. The Azura Blood Road is about to collapse. One Er's beautiful eyes flashed. There was no point in continuing the fight because they would all be teleported out soon. Yitzangshan's eyes were very cold because he was busy with Princess Luoho and had no time to attack Dugu Qiuma. It would be strange if Yi Songshan was in a good mood when the opportunity that he had been plotting for so long had gone to someone else. Rumble. The entire Azura Blood Road was collapsing. Cracks that were tens of thousands of feet long were spreading across the sky. After the Azura Saint King's clone dissipated, the Azura Bloody Road was supposed to collapse. The battle between Gu Xiaoyang and Dugu Chuma merely sped up the process. Finally, the entire Azura Blood Road mystic realm collapsed. Dugu Chioimo and the others were swallowed up by the space vortex and forcefully brought out of this space. At the same time, in the outside world, in the Blood Demon Valley, the atmosphere was so silent and solemn that it was somewhat frightening. And the source of this silent atmosphere came from the mystic demon palace. The expressions of the experts from the mysterious demon hall were frighteningly cold when they saw the names of Yuan Hua and Hun Moz disappear from the blood light screen. Fan Yuan's face was filled with disbelief. He did not believe that Yuan Hua and Hun Moz would die in the Azura Blood Road. However, what was more coincidental was that the two deaths seemed to be related to Dugu Chuma. Dugu Chuma's score was also ranked first. No, I don't believe that Yuan Hua would die in the hands of Dugu Chuma. Fan Yuan could not believe it. Not to mention him, even Pei Tu and the others from the Heavenly Demon sect had a suspicious look. It was already surprising that Dugu Chuma could kill Han Moz. But if he killed Yuan Hua, it was indeed a little unbelievable. Could there be a mistake? Even the Demon Queen's charming face showed a trace of doubt. At first, she was actually a little interested in the white-haired sword demon who was famous in the Moro dynasty and had slaughtered 13 cities. She even thought that he might be a strong contender for the position of the emperor's son-in-law. But when she saw Dugu Chuma, the Demon Queen was a little disappointed. This was because Dugu Chuma was not even at the divine dwelling stage. He was far from meeting the Demon Queen's requirements for her daughter's husband. Therefore, the Demon Queen also suspected that there was something wrong with the blood-red light curtain, or that something else had happened in the Azura Blood Road. Maybe there's something wrong with the light curtain. Fan Yuan and the others from the Mystic Demon Palace held a glimmer of hope in their hearts. However, the blood-red door in the Blood Demon Valley suddenly trembled and was covered with cracks. Then, the space distorted and several figures were blasted out like exploding fish. They were the surviving experts. What's going on? What happened? Everyone's eyes were fixed on the scene. The Azura Blood Road is gone, a cultivator murmured absent-mindedly. What? The Moro imperial family and the people of the 6 great forces were taken aback when they heard this. The Azura Blood Road had always been one of the most famous secret domains in the Moro dynasty. How could it be gone just like that? However, the cultivators who were teleported out all described the same situation. They couldn't help but believe it. At this moment, a few more figures wrapped in brilliance appeared, accompanied by the sounds of intense clashes. It was Princess Luo Ho and the others. 2 of the figures were still engaged in a fierce battle. That's Dugu Chuma. Everyone quickly locked onto the identity of one of the figures. His white hair fluttered in the wind and blood-red chi surged. It was Dugu Chuma. As for the other person he was fighting, many forces and martial artists were surprised. That person is. Some people were hesitant, but soon, someone recognized him. The person fighting with Dugu Chuma seems to be Gu Xiaoyang of the Starry Sword Pavilion? What? Everyone was shocked as they looked towards the battle between Dugu Chuma and Gu Xiaoyang. They didn't expect that a heaven pride from an overlord force would come to the Moro dynasty. However, a moment later, Yi Songyue and Wan were recognized one after another, causing an uproar. What? The witch of the demonic sect? The Demon Queen was surprised. However, what surprised her more was that Dugu Chuma's strength was enough to compete with Gu Xiaoyang. But who was Gu Xiaoyang? He was one of the top 10 young masters, young master Xingyun. Didn't that mean that Dugu Chuma's true strength was at the level of the top 10 young masters? Upon coming to this realization, the Infernal Queen and company drew a gasp. Pei Tu of the Sky Demon sect finally made his move. He raised his hand and unleashed the strength of a false saint, separating Dugu Chuma and Gu Xiaoyang. You! Gu Xiaoyang's expression was cold. Young Master Gu, this is the Moro dynasty. Even if you're the heaven's pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, you should know how to restrain yourself. Duguqiuma is the saint of the Sky Demon sect. I can't just watch you fight, Pei Tu said in a deep voice. Now that Duguqiuma had won first place in the Azura Blood Road, he had endless potential and was strong enough to compete with the top 10 young masters. He was the treasure of the Sky Demon sect. How could Pei Tu just watch Gu Xiaoyang attack Duguqiuma? However, because of Gu Xiaoyang's background, Pei Tu couldn't really do anything to him. Otherwise, he might incur the wrath of the Starry Universe Sword Pavilion. Chapter 1194. You want to stop me? Gu Xiaoyang's face turned ugly. Pei Tu said coldly, Young Master Gu, please pay attention to your words. Although you are a heaven pride of the Starry Sword Pavilion, I am also a false saint expert. A false saint expert had the dignity of a false saint expert. Even if Gu Xiaoyang had an extraordinary background, he was still only a divine-dwelling heaven pride. It was extremely disrespectful to speak to a false saint expert in such a tone. Gu Xiaoyang exhaled deeply. He knew that with a false saint expert intervening, it would be very difficult and almost impossible for him to kill Duguqiuma. Duguqiuma, you really only know how to be a coward, Gu Xiaoyang said coldly. You can't do anything to me. Duguqiuma's face was indifferent. If Duguqiuma used all his trump cards, he might be able to pose a fatal threat to Gu Xiaoyang, but Gu Xiaoyang was one of the top 10 young masters and a seed of the Starry Sword Pavilion. It was impossible for him to not have any trump cards. Therefore, if they really fought to the death, the final result would be very difficult to predict. But if Duguqiuma cultivated for a period of time, his strength would grow with time, and he might not have to pay too much of a price to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Therefore, now was not the best time to kill Gu Xiaoyang. Moreover, there was a group of people watching, and Duguqiuma did not want to use all his trump cards. If you come to participate in the Heaven Pride battlefield, I will definitely turn your bones into ashes. Gu Xiaoyang flung his sleeve, temporarily suppressing his killing intent. After all, this was the Molo Empire and not the Starry Sword Pavilion. No matter how special his identity was, it was impossible for him to kill Duguqiuma under the protection of a false saint expert. It's not certain who will be buried. Duguqiuma's lips curved into a cold smile. If he joined forces with Yi Guchen's true body at that time, it was easy to imagine how embarrassed Gu Xiaoyang would be. Fairy Tsangyue, let's go, Gu Xiaoyang said softly to Yi Tsangyue, who did not want to stay here any longer. Yi Tsangyue's clear eyes were cold, resentful and complicated. Yi Tsangyue had an indescribable feeling towards the man who had taken her virginity. However, one thing was certain. Yi Tsangyue would not let Dugu off so easily. He would not let it go for all eternity. Yi Tsangyue turned around and left decisively without any hesitation. Looking at Yi Tsangyue's cold and lonely back, Duguqiuma actually had a rare complicated feeling in his heart. Of course, it was only a sliver. His emotions quickly returned to indifference. Yi Tsangyue and Gu Xiaoyang left. On the other side, Yi Tsangshan's eyes revealed a wisp of heaviness and unwillingness. Duguqiuma said indifferently, Do you want to fight me? He was not even afraid of Gu Xiaoyang. Although Yi Tsangshan had a special background, he was not afraid of him. Yi Tsangshan took a deep breath. He really wanted to fight with Duguqiuma and snatch his fortuitous opportunity. However, he couldn't do that in front of so many people. That was because his special background was too sensitive. If it was exposed, it would be extremely disadvantageous for him. Sir Wei. His old servant, the old man at the false saint level, wanted to say something but stopped. Let's go first, Yi Tsangshan said in a deep voice. Then he looked at Duguqiuma and said, Don't be too proud. That opportunity is only temporarily with you. I'll take it back in the battlefield. After saying that, Yi Tsangshan and his old servant also left. At that moment, only the people from the various forces of the Molo dynasty and the demon were left. At that moment, a cold voice with murderous intent came from the mystic demon palace. The person who spoke was a false saint expert from the mystic demon palace. He did not see Yuanhua come out. His last hope was shattered. Yuanhua had really died in the Azura Bloody Road. You killed Yuanhua and Han Mozi? The false saint expert from the Mystic Demon Palace's murderous intent seemed to freeze the space. That's right, Duguchioemo said in a casual tone. Boom. The experts from the Mystic Demon Palace could not help but release their auras. Their eyes were overflowing with anger. How could he still be so calm after killing 2 heavenly talents from the Mystic Demon Palace? It was not just the Mystic Demon Palace. The experts from the 6 Desire Demon sect also stepped out and said, "Did you also kill Miao Yu from the 6 Desire Demon sect?" "Indeed," Duguchioemo said indifferently. "And Shan Yu from the Demonic Beast sect as well?" The expert from the Demonic Beast sect said coldly. "Of course," Duguchioemo said indifferently. Boom. The false saints from the 3 forces all looked gloomy and angry. Under such a situation, even Pei Tu felt great pressure. He, a false saint, could not resist 3 false saints at the same time. However, Duguchioemo was calm in the face of the 3 forces' murderous intent. His expression would not change even if Mount Tai collapsed in front of him, because he knew that someone definitely did not want him to die. Just as the experts from the 3 forces could not help but want to attack, a pleasant voice with a cold intent sounded. "If you want to die, you can attack Duguchioemo." The person who spoke was Wan the Witch. Seeing this, the experts from the 3 forces' expressions changed slightly. Wan was backed by the Demonic Extermination sect, an overlord force. However, they could not understand why the witch of the Demonic Extermination sect would protect Duguchioemo. Could it be? On the other side, the Demon Queen was deep in thought. She thought of the Demon King ascending the 9 heavens vision that had shaken the South Horizon region. If that was the case, the Demon Queen took a deep breath. No wonder Wan would protect Duguchioemo. Which, although you are from the Demonic Extermination sect, this is a grudge between our forces. It has nothing to do with you, the false saint from the Mystic Demon Palace said in a low voice. How does it have nothing to do with me? Wan tilted her head and asked, "What does it have to do with you?" The expert from the 6 Desire Demon sect said coldly. Wan's words were shocking. She said directly, "Duguchioemo wants to join the Demonic Extermination sect. Are you sure you want to attack him?" What? Wan's words shocked all the other forces. Their eyes bulged out of their sockets. Duguchioemo wanted to join the Demonic Extermination sect? The experts from the Mystic Demon Palace, the Demonic Beast sect, and the 6 Desire Demon sect all had ugly expressions. It was as if they had eaten a dead fly. They could ignore the Sky Demon sect, but they could not ignore the Demonic Extermination sect. How is this possible? How can that kid? The experts from the 3 forces clenched their fists. Although they were unwilling, they did not dare to act rashly. If what Wanner said was true, then the price they would have to pay if they killed Duguchioemo was the Demonic Extermination sect's revenge. The Demon Queen said, "Life and death in the Azura Blood Road are up to the heavens. Killing is not forbidden. Yuanhua's death can only be attributed to his lack of strength." Hearing the Demon Queen speak, the experts from the 3 forces could only swallow their anger. It was not that they did not want to deal with Duguchioemo, but the current Duguchioemo was no longer someone they could touch. Duguchioemo was slightly surprised. He did not expect the Demon Queen to speak up for him. One had to know that the Demon Queen's attitude towards him was one of disdain and neglect. The Demon Queen smiled and said, "By the way, when the Azura Blood Road opened, I said that I would choose a husband for the princess. I wonder if you, Duguchioemo, are willing to be the prince consort of the Molo dynasty?" As soon as these words were spoken, everyone was stunned. Chapter 1195. Back when the Azura Blood Road had just opened, the Demon Queen had looked down on Duguchioemo. She even thought that he was not qualified to compete for the position of the Mara dynasty's prince consort. But now, the Demon Queen was so attentive to Duguchioemo that she even took the initiative to invite him. "Mother, what are you talking about?" Princess Luoho's face under the mask changed slightly. She did not know what to feel. Originally, she should have been repulsed by this, but now, she had a complicated feeling. I think he's very suitable to be the Mara dynasty's prince consort. The demon queen smiled. She vaguely guessed that Duguchuma was probably the unparalleled demon king who had caused the demon king to descend to the ninth heaven. Otherwise, he would definitely not be favored by the demon queen of the demonic sect. Besides, other than Duguchuma, she could not find a more suitable candidate. Yi Songshan came from the dark world, so he was not suitable to be the prince consort. As for Yuan Hua, Soul Demon Master, and the other top 10 male sky prides of the blood ranking, they had all died in the hands of Duguchuma. Therefore, Duguchuma seemed to be the only candidate. Not to mention that Duguchuma was very powerful and could compete with the 10 great childs. There was another reason why the demon queen wanted to choose a son-in-law for Princess Luoho. She wanted Princess Luoho to have someone to take care of her on the battlefield of sky prides. Duguchuma's strength was enough to protect Princess Luoho. Pei Tu and the other experts of the heavenly demon sect were happy to see the demon queen's intention of marriage. On the other hand, Qingqing smiled bitterly when she saw this scene. However, she was relieved now. It was enough to have fate with Duguchuma. Duguchuma was not someone she could keep. The gap between her and Duguchuma had widened. They were not even on the same level. "Daughter, this is a good match," the demon queen advised with a smile. Princess Luoho did not say a word. She had always been cold and indifferent. At this moment, she had a complicated feeling like a little girl. Seeing this, Wanner smiled and said, "Being with Duguchioimo won't be a bad thing because," as Wanner spoke, she took light steps and landed beside Princess Luoho. She lowered her voice and whispered something. Princess Luoho's delicate body immediately tensed up. Her cold and beautiful eyes under the mask revealed a wisp of extreme surprise. "He's actually, it's good that you know. Don't say it out loud." Wanner smiled. Princess Luoho's heart trembled, and she was momentarily stunned. Wanna had just told her that Duguchioimo was the one who had triggered the Demon King descends to the 9 heavens. Previously, Princess Luoho had told the Infernal Queen that she was only interested in the person who had triggered the phenomenon of the heavenly baneful star and the infernal emperor. Never would she have thought that Duguchioimo was the one who had triggered the devil emperor phenomenon. Of course, if she knew that the heavenly cursed lone star phenomenon was also triggered by Dugu's plea to the devil, she would be even more shocked. "What? You still don't want to?" Wanner smiled. Princess Luoho fell silent and felt a little bashful. However, from the Infernal Queen's point of view, Princess Luoho's lack of objection meant that she had agreed. "Duguchioimo, what about you?" The Infernal Queen looked at Duguchioimo. Duguchioimo pondered for a moment. He still needed Princess Luoho's Luoho life providence to help him activate the heavenly baneful life providence. Therefore, he did not refuse and nodded lightly. When Princess Luoho saw this, an unnatural blush appeared on her usually cold face. "All right, then it's decided." The Infernal Queen appeared very happy. As for the opportunity that Duguchioimo had obtained, no one dared to target him with his current status. The Azura Bloody Path had come to an end. Of course, the Azura Bloody Path would not open again in the future because the entire mystic realm would no longer exist. And the one who had benefited the most was naturally Duguchioimo. He had naturally replaced Yi Songshan as the #1 genius of the Mola dynasty. After that, Wanner also looked for Duguchioimo alone to ask about it. She asked Duguchioimo if he wanted to follow her back to Annihilation Demonic Sect or something else. In fact, Duguchioimo did not need to participate in the battlefield of the elites, because he could already become a disciple of Annihilation Demonic Sect. However, Duguchioimo still decided to participate because the battlefield of the elites was also a rare experience and opportunity. There might be an opportunity for Duguchioimo to break through to the supremacy realm. Not to mention, he still had to work with Yiguchen's original body to deal with Gu Xiaoyang, Huang Qianxiu, Di Haoyan, and the others. Although Yiguchen was not weak, the enemies were equally strong. No matter how strong Yiguchen was, it was impossible for him to defeat all these opponents by himself. However, if Dugu Chiyomo's power was added, he would have nothing to fear if his original body and clone worked together. Seeing that Dugu Chiyomo was determined to participate in the battlefield of the elites, could only give up on the idea of bringing him back to the sect for the time being. You have to live well. After all, if you join Annihilation Demonic Sect in the future, you might be able to participate in the competition for the position of Junior Sect Master, said solemnly. The competition in Annihilation Demonic Sect was also fierce. We'll talk about it when the time comes, Dugu Chiyomo said calmly. Wana raised her brows and said, "You can't be careless. The strongest genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect is on the same level as one of the four princes." Dugu Chiyomo was surprised. He did not expect that a genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was one of the four princes. In other words, the genius of Annihilation Demonic Sect was also on the same level as Huang Qianqiu. When the time comes, he will also participate in the battlefield of the elites. If he finds out about you, he might kill you, so be careful, warned. Got it? Dugu Chiyomo nodded slightly. Although there was one more potential enemy, Dugu Chiyomo was still not afraid. In the end, the witch also left for the time being to prepare for the battlefield of the elites. Dugu Chiyomo did not return to Heavenly Demon Sect. Instead, he followed the Demon Queen and the others back to the Mara royal family. With Wan and Annihilation Demonic Sect as his backing, Dugu Chiyomo was not afraid that the Mara royal family would do anything to him. After returning to the Mara royal family, although Princess Luoho and Dugu Chiyomo had not held their wedding ceremony for the time being, the two of them were already living in the same palace. Dugu Chiyomo had borrowed Princess Luoho's Luoho life providence to comprehend his heaven fiend life providence. At the same time, because Dugu Chiyomo had broken through to the divine dwelling stage, his soul-devouring demon eye had also awakened the ability of the spirit demon seed. In other words, he could plant a demon seed in the enemy's knowledge sea and enslave them. Of course, this was only effective on those who were weaker than Dugu Chiyomo or those who did not have a strong soul will. The effect would be greatly reduced on the heaven prides of the same level. However, to Dugu Chiyomo's surprise, Princess Luoho gritted her teeth and said she wanted him to help her deal with an opponent who had once displeased her. "Who is it?" Dugu Chiyomo asked. "Jin Kuei of the Sword Dynasty, Dugu Bai," Princess Luoho said. Princess Luoho was very upset when she thought of how she had suffered at the hands of Yi Guqin in the Sacred Dynasty's treasure trove. "Heh, sure." Dugu Chiyomo smiled. If he encountered his true body, it would not be a bad idea to spar with him. Dugu Chiyomo also wanted to know who was stronger between him and his true body. Chapter 1196. After the Azura Bloody Road, Dugu Chiyomo stayed in the Imperial Palace to cultivate and prepare for the Azura Bloody Road. On the other side, at the border of the Mola Empire, Yi Songyue and Gu Xiaoyang flew across the sky one after another. "Young Master Gu, you don't have to follow me anymore," Yi Songyue said coldly and expressionlessly. "Fairy Songyue, what's wrong with you?" Gu Xiaoyang asked suspiciously. Ever since Yi Songyue and Dugu Chiyomo came out of the Opportunity Secret Realm, Yi Songyue seemed to be in a bad mood. Although Yi Songyue was cold to him before, it was not to the point of annoyance. However, Yi Songyue was too lazy to travel with him now. "It's nothing. I'm tired. Is that okay?" Yi Songyue walked away and shook Gu Xiaoyang off. "What's going on? Could it be impossible?" Gu Xiaoyang's heart skipped a beat. A thought that he found somewhat impossible emerged in his mind. No, it can't be like this. Fairy Songyue must have other reasons for being so pure. "Dugu Chiyomo, if you participate in the prodigy battlefield, I'll kill you." Gu Xiaoyang's eyes were extremely cold. On the other side, Yi Songyue held her stomach with one hand and looked confused. She felt that the immortal divine embryo in her body seemed to have undergone some kind of shocking transformation. It seemed like it was about to give birth to something. "Dugu Chiyomo, could it be that you?" Songyue did not dare to think too deeply. There was a rare trace of confusion and uneasiness in her heart. "Sword Dynasty, in the Sword Catacomb." A handsome young man in a black robe and black hair sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. A terrifying and powerful sword concept rolled around his body. It was Yiguchen. When he was alone, he would take off his grimace mask. At a certain moment, Yiguchen suddenly opened his eyes. There seemed to be a golden light flowing in his dark eyes. He raised his hand and the 9-dragon thunder prison fell into his hand. He pointed his sword at the sky and caused the sky to change color. Sky as Qian. Then, Yiguchen pointed his other hand at the ground. Earth as Kuan, pointing up at the heavens, pointing down at the earth. Between the heavens and the earth, only I am supreme. Unifying heaven and earth, unparalleled saint sword. Yiguchen gathered his genuine qi, and an extremely dazzling golden sword aura appeared. It was like a divine light that could split the heavens and the earth. It illuminated the sky and slashed the earth. As the sword slashed down, the entire sword tomb rumbled and trembled. The sword qi storm that roiled in the surroundings all year round temporarily stopped because of this resplendent sword. In front of Yiguchen, a 300-meter-long and 10-meter-deep fissure appeared. Its destructive power was extremely strong. Is this the power of the sacred sword of heaven and earth? Yiguchen muttered to himself. During this period of time, he had always been in seclusion in the sword tomb, comprehending various sword arts and martial arts, and his gains were also great. Yiguchen had finally succeeded in his initial cultivation of the sacred sword of Qianquan. Its power did not disappoint Yiguchen. In addition, Yiguchen had completely mastered the 8 sword moves of the 8 extremities reincarnation sword technique. Of course, Yiguchen had not completely comprehended the combination of the 8 moves yet, but he was not far away. The reincarnation sword lotus, the unique skill of the 6th generation sword master, had been completely mastered. Being able to perform the perfect 360 leaves of the reincarnation sword lotus, its power was also incomparable. There was also the most important ultimate sword realm. Yiguchen could perform the combination of 3 sword realms, and its power was several times stronger than the combination of 2 sword realms. However, for the ultimate sword realm, only the combination of 4 sword realms could be considered a complete ultimate sword realm. I have gained a lot during this period of seclusion. Yiguchen exhaled softly. Although his realm did not increase, the various sword arts had increased Yiguchen's combat power. His current combat power was more than twice as strong as before he went into seclusion. Yiguchen had made ample preparations for the battlefield of Sky Prides. Oh yes, there's also this. Yiguchen seemed to have thought of something. A sparkling and resplendent sword embryo that flowed with chaotic energy emerged from his body. It was the Khanate sword embryo. It was also Yiguchen's gifted superpower as a 7th grade Sky Pride. However, at this moment, the sword embryo seemed to have undergone some kind of transformation. A layer of strange light enveloped the sword embryo, as if it had an indestructible power. Eat Sangyue. Yiguchen sighed deeply. When he was in seclusion in the sword tomb, Yiguchen had focused on cultivating and had not taken the initiative to sense Dugu Chiomo's situation. It was only after he went into seclusion that Yiguchen found out about this matter. Of course, Yiguchen could not blame Dugu Chiomo. After all, Dugu Chiomo was his demonic doppelganger. His behavior and character were not exactly the same as his. Let's put the matter of Yi Zhangyue aside for now. However, has this sword embryo transformed into the innate indestructible sword embryo? Yiguchen scrutinized the sword embryo. The innate indestructible sword embryo and the innate indestructible divine embryo could be merged into the innate indestructible sword embryo. This was why Gu Xiaoyang, who had obtained the sword embryo, had been pestering Yi Zhangyue. However, the innate indestructible sword embryo had now been obtained by Yiguchen. Of course, if it were Yiguchen, he would definitely not do anything to Yi Zhangyue for the sake of the innate indestructible sword embryo. It could only be said that everything was due to fate and there was no reason for it. I'll think of a way to deal with Yi Zhangyue in the future. Yiguchen shook his head slightly. Now that his seclusion had come to an end, continuing it would not be of much help to Yiguchen. He put on the ghost mask and walked out of the sword tomb. As soon as he walked out, he saw a girl in green with a silver sword master mask waiting for him. Master! Seeing that Yiguchen had come out of seclusion, the girl flashed to his side. It was Mu Xingzu. What's the matter? Yiguchen smiled faintly. Master, the opening of the battlefield of prodigies is near, but… Xingzhu wants to go somewhere, Mu Xingzu said hesitantly. Oh, where is it? Yiguchen asked. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty, Mu Xingzu said. The Swallow Cloud Dynasty? Yiguchen was momentarily stunned. If Mu Xingzu had not mentioned it, he would have forgotten about it. Ever since the Battle of the Infinite Plains, Yiguchen had been stranded in the Cloud Dynasty and then came to the Sword Dynasty. He had always been in the midst of intense battles and cultivation. He had indeed forgotten that there was a group of people who always remembered him. There was also a girl who missed him. Yan Wushuang. Yiguchen murmured in his heart. The delicate and stubborn face of a girl appeared in his mind. Master, can we go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty to take a look? Mu Xingzu asked carefully. She was also a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. When she heard that the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest had moved to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, she had been thinking about it and wanted to see her senior brothers and sisters. It's not good to let them know that I'm still alive for now, Yiguchen said with a sigh. It was not that he did not trust the people of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. It was because there were too many people in the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. If his identity was accidentally revealed, the consequences would be unimaginable. If the news that the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui was Yiguchen got out. In less than a day, the Celestial Sword Sect, Starry Sword Pavilion, and Dongfang family would send troops to the Sword Dynasty. If the three forces attacked, even the half-step Holy King Proud Continent would find it difficult to resist. So the consequences were too serious. Yiguchen did not dare to be careless. It did not matter whether Yiguchen lived or died, but he did not want to be a burden to the Sword Dynasty. If Yiguchen really wanted to reveal his identity, he would have to at least wait until after he participated in the Prodigy battlefield and an overlord was willing to recruit him. At that time, Yiguchen's name would reappear in the world. I see. Xingzhu didn't think it through properly. Mu Xingzu lowered her head and was a little unhappy. Of course, she could understand Yiguchen. I only said that I can't reveal my identity. Did I say that I won't go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty? Yiguchen chuckled. Chapter 1197. What? Can we really go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty to see senior brother and senior sister? Mu Xingzu asked excitedly. Of course, but I have to hide my identity and I can't get in touch with them for the time being. Yiguchen said. The fewer people who knew that he was still alive, the better. After all, if Yiguchen's identity was exposed in advance, it would be a disaster for him and the Sword Dynasty. That's fine, as long as we can catch up with senior brother and senior sister. Mu Xingzu said happily. Well, get ready and let's go. Yiguchen waved his hand. In fact, he also wanted to go to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. He wanted to see his old friends from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest, Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yixie, and Sect Master Yan Chang'e and the others. How were they? After learning that Yiguchen and Mu Xingzu were going to leave the Sword Dynasty temporarily, Proud Divine Continent sent a false sacred expert to follow them, just in case. After all, Yiguchen had made a lot of enemies after the battle between the three dynasties. When Yiguchen heard this, he felt a little helpless and could only agree. A day later, Yiguchen, Mu Xingzu, and a new false sacred expert called Lin Tu who had just joined the Sword Dynasty drove a flying boat and left the Sword Dynasty. The South Horizon region's 100 Great Dynasties. Although they were called the 100 Great Dynasties, it was actually just a general term. Large and small dynasties were scattered all over the land of the South Horizon region. For example, the Sword Dynasty, which was ranked first, was naturally located in the central area of the South Horizon region. The weaker the dynasty, the more remote it was. For example, the Saint Origin Dynasty was just a low-level dynasty located at the edge of the South Horizon region. As for the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, it had a top honorable martial artist and was a high-level dynasty, located near the central area of the South Horizon region. However, although the Swallow Cloud dynasty was a high-level dynasty, it was only ranked 70th or 80th among the 100 great dynasties. After all, it was very difficult for a dynasty without a false saint to hold the fort. Compared to the Sword dynasty, which was the number 1 dynasty, the gap was like the distance between the clouds and the mud. The Sword dynasty and Swallow Cloud dynasty were separated by more than 10 dynasties. It would take at least 10 days to reach the Swallow Cloud dynasty. On the 5th day, Yiguchen and the others once again flew over the sky of another empire. That empire was currently gathering its troops. Over 1 million soldiers were gathered together, and their might was boundless. Which dynasty is that? Yiguchen had nothing to do, so he asked casually. It seems to be the Phoenix Nye dynasty, said Lin Tu, the pseudo-saint expert who had come with them. Phoenix Nye dynasty. Yiguchen's eyes flashed. The Phoenix Nye dynasty was a top-tier dynasty ranked 16th among the 100 great dynasties. Its foundation was extraordinary. Yiguchen hadn't forgotten the first time he had met the number 1 beauty of the Fengni dynasty, Princess Fengxi, in the Xing Yuan dynasty's imperial capital. Although she had a hostile relationship with Yan Wushuang at first. But gradually, her relationship with Yiguchen and the others became harmonious. Princess Fengxi even had a little ambiguous relationship with Yiguchen. At that time, Princess Fengxi was the princess of a top-tier dynasty, while Yiguchen was just a disciple of a low-tier dynasty. The difference in status between the two was like heaven and earth. But now, Yiguchen's status as a Jinkue had far surpassed Princess Fengxi's. Forget it. Yiguchen shook his head slightly and dismissed the idea of meeting Princess Fengxi. He wasn't particularly familiar with Princess Fengxi. They could only be considered to have crossed paths. After another 5 or 6 days, Yiguchen finally arrived at the Swallow Cloud dynasty. The Swallow Cloud dynasty didn't have a large territory, but it wasn't weak among the top-tier dynasties. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been able to squeeze into the top 100. But there was something that made Yiguchen frown slightly. When he came in from the border of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, he saw that the various cities were heavily guarded. It was as if a war was about to break out. Could it be? Yiguchen's eyes flashed with a trace of darkness. Next, Yiguchen drove the flying boat to the capital of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the Swallow capital. As the imperial capital of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the Swallow capital should be bustling with life and tourists. But now, the Swallow capital seemed a little desolate. There were much fewer people coming and going. This was because something big had happened recently. Empress Fengni of the Phoenix dynasty was about to lead an army to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. There were rumors that it was because Empress Fengni still had a grudge against the former prince of the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Yan Chang'e. At this moment, on a tall building in the imperial palace of the Swallow capital, a young girl stood by the eaves of the tall building. The wind blew over and her silky black hair fluttered. She was wearing a light blue silk skirt with a graceful figure. That pair of perfectly proportioned, round and smooth jade-like legs made the young girl even more slender and elegant, like a delicate and upright daffodil. This girl was Yan Wushuang. At this moment, she was looking into the distance with some reminiscence and confusion in her eyes. Yan Wushuang had been like this for nearly a year, often leaning against the side of the tall building. How she wished that one day, a figure would appear from the horizon and return on a 7-colored cloud. But Yan Wushuang knew that this was just wishful thinking. It's been an entire year. Yan Wushuang's exquisite face was dim and dejected. Compared to her stubbornness before, she was valiant and heroic. Yan Wushuang now looked a little haggard and weak. At this moment, a pair of jade-like arms suddenly wrapped around Yan Wushuang's slender waist. Then, a pretty face peeked out from the side. Wushuang, do you miss him again? The girl had a ponytail and was always smiling as she comforted Yan Wushuang. Who else could it be other than Ji Ling? Yan Wushuang frowned and remained silent. I believe that junior brother Yi isn't dead. One has to believe in something, right? Ji Ling comforted. Thank you, Ji Ling. Yan Wushuang forced a smile. If Ji Ling hadn't been by her side for the past year, she would have been in even more pain. Just then, a handsome young man in luxurious clothes hurriedly walked up the stairs and said, "Cousin Wushuang, that prince is here again. Quickly go and greet him." If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely recognize that the young man in luxurious clothes was Yen Xiaotang, who'd been to the Sword Sect's forest of pagodas. He'd even gotten into a lot of unpleasantness with Yi Guchen. "It's him again. That fellow who's harassing Wushuang. Why don't you tell him to scram?" Ji Ling's expression immediately changed, and she shouted with knitted brows. Yen Xiaoting said with a straight face, "How can you say that? That prince is here to help the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Without his help, what can our Swallow Cloud dynasty use to deal with the Phoenix dynasty? So you want Wushuang to be his concubine?" Ji Ling glared. "What's wrong with being his concubine? He's the prince of the Great Qian dynasty. Do you know the Great Qian dynasty? It's a powerful dynasty ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. It's even more powerful than the Phoenix dynasty." When the Great Qian dynasty was mentioned, Yen Xiaotang's eyes couldn't help but reveal deep reverence and respect. That was a powerful dynasty ranked 12th. To put it bluntly, any one or two false saint experts could destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Yen Xiaotang's opinion, if the Swallow Cloud dynasty could obtain the help of the Great Qian dynasty, then the Phoenix dynasty would be nothing. What was the Phoenix Nye dynasty? Chapter 1198. After hearing Yen Xiaotang's words, Yen Wushuang and Ji Ling didn't look too good. Ji Ling especially didn't want Yen Wushuang to be that lecher's concubine. However, the name of the Great Qian dynasty was like an ancient mountain that pressed down on their hearts. The Great Qian dynasty was ranked 12th among the 100 great dynasties. There were more than 10 false saint experts in the dynasty, and it could be said to be extremely powerful. The Yenyun dynasty wasn't even an ant in front of the Great Qian dynasty. Even the 16th-ranked Fengni dynasty wasn't willing to openly go against the Great Qian dynasty. "Cousin, think about it carefully. It's the Great Qian dynasty." Yen Xiaotang was still trying to persuade her. Previously, he also had some thoughts about Yen Wushuang, but he completely cut it off later because he knew that Yen Wushuang didn't like him at all. Now that the Yenyun dynasty was in danger, only Yen Wushuang could save the entire dynasty. Yen Xiaotang took the initiative to step forward and wanted to matchmake this matter. "Are you still Wushuang's cousin? Why aren't you thinking about her at all? Don't you know what kind of person the Great Qian prince is?" Ji Ling was so angry that her face turned red. The 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty was dissolute and promiscuous. He had more than 100 concubines. Would Yen Wushuang be happy to marry such a vile prince as his concubine? Yen Xiaoting pulled a long face and said to Yen Wushuang, "Are you still thinking about Yi Guchen?" Yen Wushuang lowered her head and remained silent. Yen Xiaoting shook his head and said, "Cousin Wushuang, look on the bright side. Yi Guchen is already dead. It's all in the past. The dead can't come back to life." Yen Wushuang clenched her jade-like hands tightly and a trace of pain appeared on her exquisite face. Yen Xiaoting didn't care at all and continued, "Even if Yi Guchen is still alive, so what? Can he save the Yenyun dynasty and help us deal with the Fengni dynasty? That's why we have to look on the bright side. I think the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty is quite sincere." "Enough, shut up," Ji Ling reprimanded. She couldn't listen to it anymore. "Sai, no matter what, you should at least go and take a look. Grandfather Emperor and the others are also receiving them." Yen Xiaotang shook his head and said, "Grandpa Emperor." Yen Wushuang seemed to be struggling. The imperial grandfather they were referring to was the retired emperor of the Yenyun dynasty. He was also the strongest person in the Yenyun dynasty, a top honorable one. "All right, I'll go," Yen Wushuang said coldly. "Shuang." Ji Ling bit her lips until they turned white. That's more like it." Yen Xiaotang heaved a sigh of relief. If Yen Wushuang agreed, then all the difficulties would be easily solved. At this moment, in a dazzling reception hall, a young man dressed in a lavender robe was sitting leisurely on a wooden armchair. Beside him stood several attendants. If Yi Guchen were here, he would definitely be surprised. It was because the man in the lavender robe was none other than Yang Haoye, the eighth prince of the Great Qian dynasty whom he had met in the ancient Chaos Wasteland during his first mission at Sacred Cliff College. At that time, Yang Haoye, Su Jiqing and the others were besieged by the death worms, and Yi Guqin was the one who helped them out. Later on, Yang Haoye had bad intentions, and Yi Guqin took out the sword Sun token, which almost scared Yang Haoye out of his wits. However, at this moment, Yang Haoye's attitude was frivolous, and the corners of his mouth curled up arrogantly as if he was superior to others. There was a group of people standing at the side, led by a yellow-haired old man. He was the retired emperor of the Yenyun dynasty and the grandfather of Yen Wushuang and the others, Yen He. Behind him was Yen Wushuang's father, the former master of the sword sect Pagoda Forest, Yen Chang'e. Yen Xiaotong's father, the prince of the Yenyun dynasty, Yen Bailin, was also there. In addition, Yen Feiling, who had been to the sword sect Pagoda Forest, was also in the group. It could be said that most of the important people in the Yenyun dynasty were gathered there. Princess Wushuang hasn't arrived yet? Yang Haoye's tone was slightly impatient. Eighth prince, I'm sorry to keep you waiting, but she should be here soon, Yen He said warmly. He was the retired emperor of a country, but at this moment he had to bow down. It was because Yang Haoye was the prince of the Great Qian dynasty. He casually called a few servants, and they were all top supremacies who could compete with Yen He. Not to mention that there were more than 10 false saints in the Great Qian dynasty. Such a status was not something that the Yenyun dynasty could provoke. Moreover, the crisis of the Fengni dynasty was approaching, and only with the help of the Great Qian dynasty could the Yenyun dynasty tide over this crisis. Not long after, 3 figures walked in from outside the guest hall. It was Yen Wushuang, Ji Ling, and Yen Xiaoting. When he saw Yen Wushuang, Yang Haoye's eyes lit up. Yen Wushuang's face was exquisite, and her figure was curvy. In particular, her beautiful snow-white long legs were even more eye-catching. TSK, how enjoyable would it be to have those long legs wrapped around my waist? Yang Haoye thought to himself, and his eyes could not help but reveal a lustful look. He liked women, and previously wanted to subdue Su Jiqing in the ancient Chaos Wasteland. In the end, Su Jiqing went with Yi Guqin. Later on, Yang Haoye accidentally saw Yen Wushuang who was participating in the training in a secret realm. He was immediately attracted to her. After learning that the Fengni dynasty was about to attack the Yenyun dynasty, Yang Haoye directly came to the Yenyun dynasty, wanting to take Yen Wushuang as a concubine. Yen Wushuang saw the lustful look in Yang Haoye's eyes and frowned slightly. She forcefully suppressed the disgust in her heart and bowed slightly. Wushuang greets the 8th prince. Princess Wushuang, will be a family in the future, no need to be so formal, Yang Haoye said with a laugh. Yen Wushuang frowned and said, Wushuang doesn't know what the 8th prince means. Oh, you mean, you're not willing to be this prince's concubine? Yang Haoye's smile faded, and his tone was slightly cold. The follower by the side berated loudly, How dare you, a mere princess of a small country, it's your honor to be fancied by His Highness, and you actually dare to refuse. The reprimand of the follower made the faces of Yen He and the rest turn ugly. No matter what, Yen Wushuang was still the princess of a country. How could she be reprimanded by a follower of Yang Haoye? Yen Chang'e took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the anger in his heart. His current cultivation base had also reached the 6th heaven of Venerable Realm. Even so, it was still nothing in front of the Great Qian dynasty. Yang Haoye crossed his legs and said indifferently, I also know the situation of your Yenyun dynasty, and I specially came to help you. As long as Princess Wushuang is willing to marry me, I'll settle the matter of the Fengni dynasty for you. Yang Haoye waved his hand, appearing rather domineering. The eyes of Yen Bailin, Yen Xiaoting, Yen Feiling, and the rest all lit up. They definitely did not want the Yenyun dynasty to be destroyed. If that happened, they would not have a good ending. The price of obtaining the help of the Great Qian dynasty was only to let Yen Wushuang marry over as a concubine. In their opinion, this kind of transaction was too worth it. Even the Grand Emperor Yen He's old face revealed hesitation. Logically speaking, he definitely did not want his granddaughter to suffer. However, compared to the entire Yenyun dynasty, Yan Wushuang's happiness was insignificant. Chapter 1199. Many members of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's imperial family turned to look at Yan Wushuang. Their eyes were filled with hope and eagerness. The only way now was for Yan Wushuang to agree to Yang Haoye's request. Only Yan Chang'e, Ji Ling, and the others had tense expressions. They couldn't bear it. The entire Swallow Cloud dynasty had to sacrifice a girl's happiness to save it. It was a little sad. But this was how the world worked. The strong were respected. With strength and background, one could do whatever they wanted. Yang Haoye looked at Yan Wushuang playfully. With his status, he could use forceful methods to force Yan Wushuang. But that would be too boring. Yang Haoye loved to see those women submit to his humiliation even though they didn't want to. Yan Wushuang clenched her fists so tightly that her knuckles turned white. An extremely conflicted expression appeared on her face. After Yi Guchen, she hadn't met another man who could move her heart. But her father, grandfather, and everyone from the Sword Sect were all in the Swallow Cloud dynasty. If the Swallow Cloud dynasty was destroyed, these people would also die. Yan Wushuang definitely didn't want to see that. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath. Her chest rose and fell as she said with difficulty, "Can you give me 3 days to consider?" Yan Wushuang couldn't make a decision now. Yang Haoye frowned, but soon relaxed. "All right, I'm not a stingy person. It's only 3 days. I can wait, but..." Yang Haoye changed the topic and continued, "It's hard to say when the Phoenix Nye dynasty will attack." What he meant was that if Yan Wushuang kept delaying, it would be too late when the Phoenix Nye dynasty attacked. Hearing this, Yan Xiaotang and the others' expressions changed. They felt uneasy. After that, Yang Haoye and his entourage left. The atmosphere in the guest hall was oppressive and dead silent. "Wushuang, it's all my fault." Yan Chang'e's face was filled with pain. The reason the Phoenix Nye dynasty started the war was because of Empress Feng Nye. She had always hated Yan Chang'e for abandoning her for an ordinary girl. After Yan Chang'e and the others returned to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, Empress Feng Nye's hidden hatred was once again aroused. That was why she decided to attack the Swallow Cloud dynasty. "Father, there's no need to say any more. This has nothing to do with you." Yan Wushuang forced a smile. "Shuang, our Swallow Cloud dynasty is too weak. That's why we have to rely on you." Yan He's old face was filled with shame. Yan Bailin continued, "Niece, you must be more open-minded. The survival of the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty depends on your choice. The life and death of a dynasty rested on the happiness of a young girl. How absurd was that? Shuang knows. Let me be alone for a while." Yan Wushuang turned around and left. Her back view was somewhat desolate. "Shuang." Ji Ling's eyes reddened. Who knew how much Yan Wushuang had endured? Just as the entire Swallow Cloud imperial family was in a gloomy mood, Yi Guchen, Mu Xingzhu, and Lin Tu finally arrived at Yen capital on a flying boat. They landed outside Yendu. Yi Guchen put on a devil mask, a black cloak, and a hood. Mu Xingzhu also put on a silver mask. Lin Tu quietly followed beside them. After entering Yendu, Yi Guchen and Mu Xingzhu didn't immediately go to the palace. Instead, they found a restaurant. They had also heard that Fengni dynasty was going to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. So that's how it is. Yi Guchen finally understood. He had passed by Fengni dynasty before and saw that they had mobilized 1,000,000 troops. He didn't expect them to attack Swallow Cloud dynasty. "Thank goodness we came. Otherwise, senior sister and the others would be in danger." Mu Xingzhu patted her small chest, still a little scared. Yi Guchen also sighed. Fortunately, he had listened to Mu Xingzhu's words and came to Swallow Cloud dynasty. Otherwise, the next time he came, Swallow Cloud dynasty would have been a pile of ruins. At this moment, someone at the side table whispered, "I wonder if Princess Wushuang will marry the 8th prince this time." Probably. After all, Swallow Cloud dynasty can only survive by relying on Great Qian dynasty. Sigh, it's a pity that Princess Wushuang has to marry such a person. Someone sighed, feeling pity for Yan Wushuang. The 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty? Yi Guqin frowned under the devil mask. If he remembered correctly, the 8th prince of Great Qian dynasty was Yang Haoye, whom he had met during a mission in ancient Chaos Wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to target Yan Wushuang. This made Yi Guqin's face turn cold. He's too much. How dare he force senior sister? How despicable! Mu Xingzu was also furious. Yang Haoye was obviously using Fengni dynasty to force Yan Wushuang to marry him. This made Mu Xingzu extremely disgusted. However, at this moment, a group of people walked up to the restaurant. Everyone in the restaurant looked over and was immediately stunned. They hurriedly shut their mouths with shock in their eyes. The person in the lead was Yang Haoye, who was dressed in a light purple robe. He was followed by his entourage. Yang Haoye and the others took their seats. Seeing this, the rest of the people around them hurriedly got up and walked downstairs, not daring to stay beside Yang Haoye for a second. Only Yi Guqin and the other two remained seated calmly. Yang Haoye didn't notice Yi Guqin and the others as he took a sip of wine alone. One of the entourage at the side sucked up to him and said, "Yan Wushuang is really insensible. It should be her honor that your highness wants to take her as a concubine. She actually declined." Yang Haoye swirled the wine in his glass and sneered, "It's normal. She wants to pretend to be a chaste woman. I've seen many women like her, but in the end, didn't they still obediently submit to me?" Hearing these words, Yi Guqin, who was seated in the corner, gradually had a cold gaze in his eyes. A trace of killing intent flashed through his eyes. The entourage continued to ask, "Your Highness, what if Yan Wushuang still refuses after 3 days? Does she still refuse?" Yang Haoye's face was cold. "Then there's no need for the Fengni dynasty to do anything. I'll destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty first and slaughter her family and friends in front of her. Let's see if she surrenders or not." "Your Highness, you're so cunning." The entourage flattered. Of course, this is my last resort." Yang Haoye smiled casually. But at this moment, a low voice suddenly sounded. "Don't you think your thoughts are too vicious?" Yang Haoye raised his eyebrows. Only then did he notice the 3 figures in the corner. He vaguely felt that he had heard this voice somewhere before, but after thinking carefully, he couldn't figure it out. Shaking his head slightly, Yang Haoye said coldly, "You're really unlucky to run into me when I'm in a bad mood." Yang Haoye held his wineglass and said coldly. The followers immediately understood and unleashed their auras. They were all Martial Highness realm experts. "How dare you displease His Highness? You lowly commoners are courting death." The followers of the Venerables shouted coldly and attacked Yi Guqin and the others together. Yang Haoye didn't pay attention to them at all and drank alone. At this moment, Lin Tu, who was sitting beside Yi Guqin, raised his hand with a cold expression. The entourage of the venerable experts directly exploded and turned into blood flowers. The sputtering blood sprayed all over Yang Haoye and the wine in his glass turned blood red. Yang Haoye was stunned. His blood-stained face froze and his pupils shrank to the size of a needle. Even his breathing seemed to have stopped. Chapter 1200. Yang Haoye's body was stained with warm blood. His face instantly froze, and his hands trembled. The wine glasses in his hands slipped to the ground, shattering into pieces. You. Yang Haoye's body trembled, and his face turned pale at a speed visible to the naked eye. To be able to kill several sovereigns with one slap, that person's strength was absolutely unfathomable. Yi Guqin indifferently stood up and walked towards Yang Haoye. "You. Who are you?" "I'm the 8th prince of the Great Qin Empire, Yang Haoye." Yang Haoye's legs went soft, and he collapsed to the ground with a plop. He kept moving backwards. It wasn't that he didn't dare to resist, but he knew that with the person's strength, he couldn't resist. His cultivation was only at the divine dwelling stage, and he wasn't even a sovereign. There was no way he could escape. Therefore, Yang Haoye could only bring out his identity and background, hoping to make the other party afraid. "You really don't change." Yi Guqin sneered. Yang Haoye had provoked him in the ancient chaos wasteland. He didn't expect Yang Haoye to bump into the muzzle of his gun again. You know me. Yang Haoye suddenly reacted, and then he seemed to remember something when he heard Yi Guchen's voice. Yi Guchen raised his head slightly, revealing the ghost mask under his hood. When he saw the mask, Yang Haoye's face tightened, and then he sucked in a breath as if he suddenly remembered something. He couldn't help but speak in a trembling voice. You are the Sword Dynasties. Dugu. That's right, I didn't expect to bump into you again after letting you go last time. What a coincidence. Yi Guchen smiled faintly. But that smile was very cold. Yang Haoye's heart sank to the bottom. Given the Great Qian Empire's information channels, how could they not know what had happened in the Sword Dynasty? Including the fact that Yi Guchen had become the new Jiankui. However, Yang Haoye could not understand why the high and mighty Sword Dynasty's Jiankui would appear in a small place like the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. Dugu bai. Lord Jiankui, please spare me this time, I'll leave immediately. Yang Haoye was not a fool. He knew that Yi Guchen might have some sort of relationship with the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, so he immediately knelt down and begged for mercy. Yang Haoye, who had been incomparably arrogant in Swallow Cloud Imperial Palace, was now kowtowing non-stop in fear. If Yen He and the other members of the Swallow Cloud Imperial family saw this scene, they would definitely be shocked. However, compared to the identity of Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty, Yang Haoye's identity as the 8th prince of the Great Qian Dynasty was really nothing. I gave you a chance, but you didn't cherish it. Yi Guchen's eyes flashed with coldness. The last time he held back, he allowed Yang Haoye to almost harm Yen Wushuang. This time, he naturally wouldn't make the same mistake. Sensing the murderous intent in Yi Guchen's voice, Yang Haoye shouted in fear, "You can't kill me. I'm a prince of the Great Qian Dynasty. If you kill me, my father, the Great Qian Emperor, will not let you off. It's useless to use anyone as a shield." Yi Guchen raised his hand and his true energy surged out. He used his fingers as a sword, pointing one to the sky and the other to the ground. Then he clasped his hands together and a terrifying golden sword aura was brewing in his palms. Then he swept out with his finger. A golden sword light that was 100 feet long lit up the sky. The incomparably ferocious golden sword radiance swept towards Yang Haoye. Yang Haoye only had time to say one word before his body was annihilated by the golden sword light, exploding into a cloud of blood and dust. That golden sword ray was simply too powerful. It was so powerful that it split the entire restaurant in two. The golden light shone and the entire Swallow capital could see it clearly. What's that? Such a phenomenon shook the imperial palace. Yen Wushuang leaned against the tall building alone and her heart was in knots. At this moment, she also saw the dazzling golden sword ray cut through the dark clouds in the sky. That's... Yen Wushuang was stunned. She did not know why, but when she saw the golden sword light, she actually had a special feeling of palpitation. Without any hesitation, Yen Wushuang moved her slender legs and her delicate body flashed out. Many people in the imperial palace were also alarmed and hurried to the scene of the incident. After killing Yang Haoye in the restaurant, Yi Guchen's expression did not change at all. It was just a prince. It was not a big deal to kill him. Moreover, he did deserve to be killed. The commotion is a little too big. Xingzhu, I'll leave for a while, Yi Guchen said. Mu Xingzhu nodded slightly. Then, Lin Tu and Yi Guchen flashed out while Mu Xingzhu stayed where she was. This was because she wanted to meet her senior brothers and sisters in the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After a while, the sound of wind whistling could be heard. It was some guards of the imperial palace. Among them, there were even a few familiar figures. Chu Qingqi, who was dressed in green, and Yi Xie were all senior disciples of the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest. After coming to the Yenyun dynasty, they joined the royal family. Those are the corpses of the Great Qian dynasty prince's followers? Chu Qingqi was shocked when he saw some broken limbs on the ground. Who killed them? Yi Xie's expression changed. The 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty had died in the capital of the Yenyun dynasty. If word got out, the Yenyun dynasty would never be able to clear their name. At this moment, they finally noticed the petite girl who was wearing a silver mask. "You are..." Chu Qingqi's expression froze. At this moment, Yan Xiaotang, Ji Ling, and Yan Wushuang also arrived. Seeing the scene in front of him, Yan Xiaotang's heart skipped a beat and he almost fainted. The 8th prince is dead? Ji Ling was also stunned, but there was a trace of joy in her eyes. Yan Wushuang's pupils also trembled. She knew very well what the 8th prince's death meant. The 8th prince's death seems to be related to this person. Chu Qingqi pointed at the masked figure. "You are..." Yan Wushuang also looked over. "Hee, senior sister, long time no see." That person took off the mask on her face, revealing a fair and pretty face. Her eyebrows were curved, and her big eyes were twinkling with a smile. "Junior sister Mu?" Yan Wushuang was stunned. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yixie, and the others were also stunned. Then joy appeared on their faces. They did not expect to meet an old friend again. Next, they exchanged greetings and sighed. Ji Ling tactfully told Mu Xingzu what happened to Yiguchen in the Tianhuang Plains, but Mu Xingzu did not know. Mu Xingzu rolled her eyes and giggled, but she did not say anything. Yan Xiaotang interrupted with a pale face. "Why are you still reminiscing at this time? This girl is very likely related to the 8th prince's death." Ji Ling asked, "Junior sister Mu, did you really kill the 8th prince?" Mu Xingzu rolled her eyes and said, "A friend of Xingzhu's killed him. He couldn't stand Yang Haoye's character, so he killed him directly." "What a friend?" Yan Wushuang and the others were shocked. What kind of friend did Mu Xingzu make that he dared to kill the 8th prince of Great Qian so casually? Chapter 12:01. You will know in the future. Mu Xingzu said casually. She also knew that the news that Yi Guchen was still alive could not be leaked out. Otherwise, Yi Guchen and the Sword Dynasty would be pressured by the 3 overlord forces. "Where is your friend? Ask him to come out. The Yenyun dynasty can't bear the death of the 8th prince." Yan Xiaotang said coldly with an ugly expression. If the matter was not resolved, the emperor of the Great Qian dynasty would definitely vent his anger on the Yenyun dynasty. By then, it would be the other 2 top dynasties that would attack the Yenyun dynasty. Isn't it just the Great Qian dynasty? What can happen? Mu Xingzu pursed her lips and did not take it seriously. Perhaps it was because she had become the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. Mu Xingzu's horizons had also been broadened. The Great Qian dynasty was not enough to scare her. Yan Xiaotang was so angry that he laughed. "The Great Qian dynasty is nothing." "How can you say that? Your friend killed the 8th prince and now he doesn't dare to come out. Do you want the Yenyun dynasty to take the blame?" "Enough, cousin, shut up," Yan Wushuang reprimanded. Those who did not know would think that Yan Xiaotang was from the Great Qian dynasty. "Cousin Wushuang, what do you know? The Yenyun dynasty is completely destroyed because of her and her friend." Yan Xiaotang swung his sleeves and left angrily. In his opinion, it would not be long before the entire Yenyun dynasty was destroyed. "I'm sorry, junior sister Mu," Yan Wushuang said apologetically. "It's okay, senior brothers and senior sisters, let's find a place to talk." Mu Xingzu looked relaxed and happy. Looking at Mu Xingzu's expression, Chu Qingqi and the rest fell into deep thought. Did Mu Xingzu really have someone to rely on? As for Mu Xingzu's sword sun mask, because there were many cultivators who wore masks, and with the Swallow Cloud dynasty's level, it was difficult for them to come into contact with the Sword Dynasty, so they did not recognize Mu Xingzu's mask. After that, Mu Xingzu, Yan Wushuang, and the others also left the collapsed restaurant. On the roof of another building, Yiguchen stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Beneath his mask, his gaze was fixed on Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, and the others. "Everyone, now is not the time to meet you. After the battle of heaven's favorites, I will drink with you," Yiguchen murmured. On the other side, Yan Wushuang seemed to have sensed something, and she suddenly turned around and looked into the distance. But there was nothing there. Yan Wushuang shook her head slightly as a self-mocking smile appeared on her face. It had been a year, and her misconceptions had increased. She always felt that the young man would come back to find her. However, it was just disappointment after disappointment. Soon, the news of the death of the 8th prince of the Great Qian dynasty spread throughout the entire Yan capital. When Grand Emperor Yan heard the news, he almost fainted from anger. Yan Bailin even wanted to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Chang'e vehemently opposed it. After all, Mu Xingzu was once a disciple of the Sword Sect Pagoda, and he was the sect master of the Sword Sect Pagoda. He had no reason not to protect Mu Xingzu's safety. Then, a few days later, another piece of bad news came. The million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty had been reorganized. Empress Fengni personally led an expedition to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At the same time, in the palace of the Great Qian dynasty, an earth-shattering roar was heard. A middle-aged man in a dragon python imperial robe had an extremely cold expression. He clapped his hand, and the dragon chair he was sitting on silently turned to dust. This middle-aged man was the Great Qian dynasty's Emperor Qian, a powerful false saint expert. Little 8th died in the Swallow Cloud dynasty? Emperor Qian asked in a gloomy tone. That's right, the servant below said. Did the Swallow Cloud dynasty not give an explanation? Emperor Qian asked coldly. No, they didn't search for the person who killed His Highness. They didn't find anything either. Well, how dare a puny Swallow Cloud dynasty look down on the Great Qian dynasty? Emperor Qian was so angry that he laughed, his voice shaking the entire palace. Where are the 4 directions heavenly guards? Your subordinate is here. For strong false divine breaths burst out. Like fire beacons, 4 figures in iron armor appeared. Come with me and destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Emperor Qian's voice boomed like thunder. He stepped into the sky with great momentum. Emperor Qian's action wasn't because Yang Haoye was important to him. After all, he had too many children, and Yang Haoye wasn't that outstanding. Emperor Qian was angry because of the Swallow Cloud dynasty's disrespect to the Great Qian dynasty. Emperor Qian and the 4 heavenly guards, a total of 5 false saints, set out together. In addition, there were hundreds of thousands of soldiers with them, ready to destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty. In Emperor Qian's opinion, destroying a high-tier dynasty was as easy as eating and drinking. Once he destroyed the Swallow Cloud dynasty, the entire Swallow Cloud dynasty would naturally fall. At the same time, millions of soldiers formed a mighty flood of steel from the Phoenix Nya dynasty's direction and headed toward the Swallow Cloud dynasty. A phoenix chariot rose high into the sky, and inside it sat a peerlessly beautiful figure. It was Empress Feng Nya, who was preparing to personally lead the troops. Suddenly, a fiery red figure blocked in front of the carriage. That was a young lady of outstanding beauty. She wore a red muslin dress, and her face was tender and charming. The flame-like phoenix mark on her forehead gave her a sense of mystery and nobility. If Yi Guchen was here, he would definitely recognize this girl. It was Princess Fengxi. Mother, do you really want to do this? Princess Fengxi bit her red lips. Fengxi, what are you doing? Empress Feng Ye frowned. Her facial features were charming and she exuded a sense of majesty. Empress Feng Ye was also a powerful false saint expert. Mother, let bygones be bygones. There's no need to keep harping on it, Princess Fengxi persuaded. Empress Feng Ye sneered. He made me lose face back then, and I can't take it lying down. It's fine if he hides like a mouse, but since he dares to return to the Swallow Cloud dynasty, he must be prepared to pay the price. But mother, you've already forced that woman to her death. We're even now, Princess Fengxi said. Move aside. I will personally destroy the Swallow Cloud dynasty and make that heartless Yan Chang'e regret rejecting me back then. Empress Feng Ye barked. An aura exploded and pushed Princess Fengxi away. The army then pointed their swords at the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Mother! Princess Fengxi murmured. Originally, she was filled with hostility toward Yan Chang'e and Yan Wushuang like Empress Feng Ye. But after going to the Saint Origin dynasty and interacting with Yi Guchen, Yan Wushuang, and the others, her hostility had unknowingly dissipated. This was why Princess Fengxi wanted to persuade Empress Fengye. However, Empress Fengye was still too stubborn. When a woman was stubborn, she could be even crazier than a man. Sigh. Princess Fengxi sighed deeply and also got on a carriage to follow. As the news of the Great Gan Dynasty and Phoenix Nye Dynasty's army spread, the entire Swallow Cloud Dynasty was in chaos. The Swallow capital was also in a state of panic. Yan He, Yan Chang'e, Yan Bailin, and the others had heavy expressions. Even Yan Xiaotang and the others were prepared to flee. After all, who could stop two top-tier dynasties? At the very least, the Swallow Cloud Dynasty wouldn't be able to. At this critical moment, the Swallow Cloud Dynasty was about to collapse. Yi Guqin clasped his hands behind his back and stood on top of a pavilion. Two top-tier dynasties attacking together? They really think highly of the Swallow Cloud Dynasty, Yi Guqin sneered. Lin Tu frowned slightly. Jinkei, the Great Gan Emperor and Empress Fengye are both very strong false saints. I'm afraid I won't be able to deal with them alone. Although Lin Tu was a false saint, his strength wasn't at the top. Not to mention that the Great Gan Emperor and Empress Fengye wouldn't be the only two false saints. Just the Great Gan Dynasty alone had 5 false saints, including the Great Gan Emperor. Yi Guqin smiled faintly and took out a communication jade. Brother Leng, isn't it a bit boring staying in the Sword Dynasty? Do you want to come out for a walk? The corner of Lin Tu's eyes twitched when he heard Yi Guqin's message. In the entire Sword Dynasty, Yi Guqin was probably the only one who could invite the solitary Cloud Sword Saint. TSK, these two dynasties are going to be in big trouble. Lin Tu shook his head and smiled. Chapter 1202. With the Qian Emperor and Empress Fengye personally leading the expedition, the entire Swallow Cloud Dynasty fell into unprecedented chaos. It even attracted the attention of the surrounding dynasties. To the outside world, the Swallow Cloud Dynasty would definitely not be able to escape this time. The strength of the two sides was not equal at all. As time passed, the armies of the two top dynasties entered the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's territory without any obstructions, heading straight for the Swallow capital. At this moment, on the city walls of the Swallow capital, Grand Emperor Yan He, Yan Chang'e, Yan Bailin, Yan Xiaotang, and Yan Wushuang were all there. Elder Qin He, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others from the Sword Sect Pagoda Forest were also there. Mu Xingzhu was also standing beside Yan Wushuang. Aside from Mu Xingzhu, who had a relaxed expression on her face, the rest of the people looked extremely solemn. It's over. I'm really done for this time. Yan Xiaotang's face was as pale as paper. It wasn't that he didn't want to escape, but no egg would remain intact when the nest was overturned. Even if he escaped, he wouldn't be able to escape anywhere. He would either die or be enslaved in the end. Yan Wushuang took a deep breath as her beautiful chest heaved up and down. She said to Yan He, Royal Grandfather, the great Qian dynasty's matter is ultimately because of Shuang. Shuang is willing to use her life to appease the Qian Emperor's anger. Yan Wushuang didn't ask Mu Xingzhu or her friend to take the blame. Instead, she was willing to take the blame herself. That's impossible. Yan He shook his head. How could he possibly send his granddaughter to her death? Let me go. Empress Fengye personally led the expedition just to target me and make me regret. Yan Chang'e's face was filled with vicissitudes as he sighed. In the end, the Swallow Cloud Dynasty's calamity was caused by him. Looking at Yan Chang'e and Yan Wushuang, the father and daughter offered themselves to him. Yan He clenched his shriveled hands tightly. He felt resentment, powerlessness, and more than anything else, unwillingness. Because the Swallow Cloud Dynasty was a small country, they couldn't resist at all and could only be swallowed by the top dynasties. No need to say any more. No matter what happens, we'll just have to deal with it. At most, we'll just die. Yan He had gotten over it. Since the end result was the same, why not be more carefree? Yan Xiaotang, Yan Failing, and the others were pale? They definitely did not want to die. Mu Xingzhu said, Don't worry, the Swallow Cloud Dynasty will be fine this time. With the protection of the Sword Dynasty's Jinkui Yi Guqin, nothing could happen to the Swallow Cloud Dynasty. When Yan Shouting heard this, he could not bear to listen any longer. With reddened eyes, he shouted, "You still dare to say that? If it wasn't for your friend who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian, would our Swallow Cloud Empire be forced into such a situation? He's just a prince with a bad character, and he even wanted to covet senior sister Yan. So what if I killed him?" Mu Xingzu shrugged her shoulders with a look of indifference. What shameless boasting. Yan Xiaodong's face was ashen, and he didn't say anything else. Then the atmosphere became so oppressive that it was suffocating. Right at this moment, a dark mass of people appeared in the distance. It was as if they had drowned the horizon. "He's here." Everyone from the royal family of Swallow Cloud was on high alert. In the distant horizon, a mighty army was rushing over with a majestic aura that shook the heavens. The whole world seemed to be shrouded in an austere atmosphere of golden spears and armored horses. The dark mass of the army came from 2 different directions. One side had a large number of people, about 1 million. It was the million-strong army of the Fengni dynasty. The other side only had a few 100,000 people, but their aura was also shocking and carried with it a conquering battle intent. Of course, the army was not the most important. The most important thing was that there were top experts. Above the army of the Fengni dynasty, a phoenix carriage crossed the void. Although the person did not appear, the powerful aura had already covered the entire Swallow capital. There was no need to say much about who was sitting in the phoenix carriage. In addition, there were 2 false saints from the Fengni dynasty. On the other side, above the army of the Great Qian dynasty, Emperor Qian and his 4 heavenly guards stood on a golden dragon boat. They were like the sun in the sky, and their aura shook the world. Is that the power of a false saint? On the Swallow Cloud Empire's side, panic and despair rose in their hearts. Yenny seemed to have aged more than 10 years in an instant, and his old face was filled with sorrow. There were 5 false saints from the Great Qian dynasty and 3 from the Fengni dynasty. A total of 8 false saints had arrived, and their aura shook the world. The entire Yen capital was like a piece of paper in front of the 8 false saints. It could be said that among the people on the city wall, only Mu Xingzu's expression did not change at all, because she had seen even more soul-stirring scenes. In the previous battle of the Sword Dynasty, even 3 heavenly tribulation saints had appeared. In comparison, the current situation seemed like a piece of cake. "Swallow Cloud Empire, how dare you?" Emperor Qian roared, and his voice was loud and clear, spreading across heaven and earth. "Please forgive us, Emperor Qian." Yenny bowed. Seeing this, Yan Wushuang bit her lips and stepped forward. "Emperor Qian, it's all because of me. I'm willing to repay Yang Haoye's life with my own." Emperor Qian said coldly, "Do you think you're worthy? I want the entire Swallow Cloud Empire to die with my son." Emperor Qian's words made everyone in the Swallow capital turn pale. Not only that, Empress Fengni of the Fengni dynasty walked out of her phoenix carriage. Her phoenix-like eyes immediately locked onto Yan Chang'e. Yan Chang'e's eyes were filled with vicissitudes, and his expression was complicated. Yan Wushuang's eyes, however, revealed a trace of hatred. It was this Empress Fengni who had forced her mother to death. Although Yan Wushuang had never seen her birth mother, it didn't mean that she didn't hate her. "Yan Chang'e, I'll ask you now. Do you regret marrying that woman?" Empress Fengni asked, her voice as cold as ice. Yan Chang'e sighed deeply and looked at Yan Wushuang. The corners of her eyes and the tips of her brows resembled her mother's. She was a woman of ordinary birth, but had a tenacious personality and was dedicated to love. Yan Chang'e's lips curled into a happy smile as he looked at Empress Fengni. "I'm sorry for what happened back then, but I, Yan Chang'e, have no regrets." Boom. Empress Fengni's aura exploded as Yan Chang'e spoke. She was furious. "Alright, since that's the case, I'll let you meet that bitch. Listen up, soldiers of Fengni." Empress Fengni waved her jade-like arm. The million-strong army charged forward with great momentum. "Mother!" Princess Fengxi bit her lip, unable to bear it. On the other side, Emperor Qian also said indifferently, "There's no need for the Swallow Cloud Empire to exist anymore. Today we'll destroy it." Hundreds of thousands of soldiers of the Great Qian dynasty advanced toward the Swallow capital. Emperor Qian, Empress Fengni, and the other false saints moved, wanting to kill the Swallow Cloud Empire's imperial family. Seeing this scene, everyone on the city walls had bitter expressions on their faces, feeling helpless in their hearts. They didn't even need to resist because they didn't even have the strength to do so. However, just as the false saints and the million-strong army were about to raze the Swallow capital to the ground, the sonorous sound of a zither suddenly rang out. Chapter 1203. The sound of the zither pierced through metal and stone like a heavenly sword piercing through the heavens. All of the millions of soldiers who didn't have a high cultivation base immediately felt a headache when they heard the sound of the zither. Their movements slowed down. Who is it? Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian sensed it at the same time and stopped in their tracks. Could there be another expert in Swallow capital? It wasn't just Empress Fengni and Emperor Qian. Even Yan He, Yan Wushuang, and the others were shocked. Someone was playing the zither at such a critical moment? Only Mu Xingzu's eyes lit up when she heard the sonorous sound of the zither. She thought to herself, is Master finally making a move? A figure was sitting cross-legged in the sky. The figure was wearing a black cloak and was sitting cross-legged. A zither was placed in front of him. At that moment, the figure was playing the zither with his hands. A terrifying sword concept surrounded him, and it resonated with the sound of the zither. Everyone was shocked. Everyone was shocked. That was because this scene was truly unexpected. The Swallow capital was on the brink of destruction. Millions of soldiers surrounded the Swallow capital. 8 false saints wanted to raze the Swallow capital to the ground. At such a critical moment, someone was sitting cross-legged in the sky and playing the zither. 1,000,000 soldiers were in front of him, but his expression did not change. What kind of heroic spirit was this? Who is that? Yan Feiling covered her mouth, her face full of astonishment. Could it be the person who killed the 8th prince of Great Qian? Yan Xiaotang thought about it and exclaimed. That was the only explanation that made sense. That is, for some reason, Yan Wushuang felt an inexplicable throbbing in her heart when she saw that figure. It was as if her heartstrings were being tugged. Is that your friend? Jiling asked Mu Xingzu curiously. Mu Xingzu smiled and nodded. Even Yan He and the others were shocked. However, Yan He's eyes dimmed when he sensed the fluctuation of the figure's cultivation. The figure sitting cross-legged in the 9th heaven playing the zither was none other than Yi Guqin. It was impossible for him to watch the Swallow Cloud Empire be destroyed by the 2 top empires. That was why he intervened. At this moment, Yi Guqin was playing the guqin, infusing his sword will into the music, shaking the spiritual sea and divine soul of the million-strong army. The song Yi Guqin played was a famous song from his previous life, Ode to the Chivalrous Man. The sound of the zither was like a sword, sonorous and resonating. It was as if a chivalrous hero had broken the world with his sword. Empress Fengni frowned and coldly shouted, "Who are you?" Not far away, Princess Fengxi also stared at Yi Guqin in astonishment. To think that someone would dare to stand in front of Yan Du at such a critical juncture. How much courage did that require? The Qian emperor swept his gaze across. When he sensed that Yi Guqin's cultivation wasn't high and hadn't even reached the honorable realm, he couldn't help but sneer. A person with a low cultivation and deliberately mystifying tricks dares to block the Great Qian dynasty's army? What a joke! As soon as Emperor Qian finished speaking, his pseudo-saint aura burst out and pressed down on Yi Guqin with one hand. Not good. Seeing this scene, Yan Wushuang, Jiling, and the others' faces changed. However, Yi Guqin didn't seem to notice the Qian emperor's attack and continued playing the zither. He seemed to have entered some kind of epiphany, and the sound of the zither became even more majestic. Deliberately mystifying tricks, die. Emperor Qian pressed down with one hand, as if he was swatting a fly. He wanted to kill Yi Guqin. At this moment, a figure soared into the sky from Yan Du and collided with Emperor Qian's move. Terrifying real qi ripples burst out like a sudden clap of thunder. A pseudo-saint expert? Emperor Qian was surprised. Yan He and the others from the Swallow Cloud imperial family were also stunned. Since when did a pseudo-saint expert arrive in Yendu? The appearance of a pseudo-saint expert shocked everyone. Even Empress Feng Ye was surprised. Pseudo-saint experts weren't cabbages that could be found on the streets. As long as a dynasty had a pseudo-saint expert, it could become a top dynasty. From this, one could see how rare and powerful they were. This pseudo-saint expert was naturally Lin Tu, who had followed Yi Guqin to the Swallow Cloud dynasty. At this moment, he said coldly, "If anyone dares to interfere, don't blame me for being merciless." Lin Tu stood beside Yi Guqin like a servant. This made Emperor Qian and Empress Feng Ye even more shocked. Why did a pseudo-saint expert feel like a servant? On the city walls of Yendu, Yan Shaoing, Yan Feiling, and the others widened their eyes and gasped in disbelief. That mysterious person actually had a pseudo-saint expert as a servant? Your friend, where did he come from? Yan Shaoting stammered as he asked Mu Xingzu with lingering fear. Back then, he had wanted to capture him and bring him to the great Qian dynasty as punishment. Now that he thought about it, he was covered in cold sweat. You'll know soon. Mu Xingzu couldn't be bothered to say anything more to a spineless person like Yan Shaoing. Ji Ling's eyes lit up. How generous! To have a pseudo-saint expert as a servant, his background must be extraordinary. Yan Wushuang's gaze never left that figure from the beginning until the end. She had a vague intuition, but she didn't dare to believe it. She was afraid that it was all just an illusion. At this moment, Yi Guqin didn't care about anything else, because he had touched upon an opportunity to gain enlightenment. The sound of the zither was sonorous and impassioned, like a swordsman from ancient times who traveled to the ends of the world with his sword. At the same time, a mysterious sword intent was released from the zither. The million soldiers suddenly realized that the swords in their scabbards were trembling involuntarily, as if they were bowing to the Emperor of Swords. That's man and sword becoming one. No, could it be? Even Lin Tu, a pseudo-saint expert, sensed the intent emanating from Yi Guqin. That intent had gradually surpassed the realm of man and sword becoming one, and was moving towards the realm of man and heaven becoming one. At a certain moment, Yi Guqin plucked the zither. The wind and clouds changed colors, and heaven and earth resonated. Among the million soldiers of the two dynasties, as long as it was a sword, it would tremble violently and then soar into the sky. Hundreds of thousands of swords circled above the 9 heavens following Yi Guqin's zither music. Heaven and earth resonated, and the firmament shook. This scene caused everyone to cry out involuntarily with shock. Yan He and the others were shocked. Yan Shaoing, Yan Feiling, and the others were shocked. Yan Wushuang, Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, Yi Xie, and the others also felt their blood rush to their heads. This was because they seemed to have seen this scene before. Back in the Tianhuang Plains, Feng Manlu had risked his life to fight and used man and heaven becoming one. That time, it was the same. The sword pointed to the sky, and tens of thousands of swords bowed. Who would listen to the song of a swordsman? Head held high for thousands of miles, unparalleled in the world. Yi Guqin waved his hands, and the sound of the zither reached its peak. The hundreds of thousands of swords turned upside down and swept out in all directions like a storm. Heaven and earth turned into sword intent, and the universe was stirred up. The million soldiers were forced back at the same time. Their faces were pale, and blood gushed out of their mouths. Their consciousness seemed to be about to explode. The song of a swordsman had forced back a million soldiers. Chapter 1204. There was an absolute silence between heaven and earth. The million soldiers who had been pushed back were pale and had blood at the corners of their mouths. They looked at Yi Guqin, who was sitting cross-legged in the sky, with unprecedented fear in their eyes. A single note of the zither had resonated with heaven and earth. 10,000 swords had pushed back a million soldiers. What kind of profound and terrifying sword realm was this? However, Yi Guqin was frowning slightly. As expected, it's still too difficult to reach the unity of heaven and man. Yi Guqin sighed inwardly. After this epiphany, his sword realm was only a fine line away from the unity of heaven and man. However, this fine line would be difficult to break through without a better opportunity. However, Yiguchen wasn't greedy. He was already very satisfied with this improvement. At this moment, everyone on the walls of Yen capital was frozen. That was because Yi Guchen's performance just now was too shocking. Everyone was shocked. What a terrifying sword realm. He's probably not far from the unity of heaven and man, right? Chu Qingqi exclaimed. However, this scene reminded them of the tragic scene in Wind Sweeping Tower, and the atmosphere fell silent for a moment. On the other side, Emperor Qian and Empress Fengye were also surprised. Such high attainments in sword Dao and the protection of a false saint expert. Even they couldn't help but be wary. Who exactly are you? Emperor Qian asked coldly. Yiguchen didn't answer, as if he couldn't be bothered with him. Emperor Qian's face darkened when he saw that he was ignored. He was the lord of the great Qian dynasty, a true saint expert. Although Yiguchen's sword Dao realm was high, his cultivation base wasn't high, so Emperor Qian didn't fear him at all. What he cared about was whether Yiguchen had any power behind him. Leave. The Swallow Cloud dynasty can't be destroyed, Lin Tu said indifferently. If the Sword Dynasty's Jiankui wanted to protect the Swallow Cloud dynasty, who would dare to destroy it? This empress is going to destroy Yen Yun today. Empress Fengye's face was cold. She swung her palm at the city walls. Lin Tu frowned and raised his hand to clash with Empress Fengye's. At the same time, Emperor Qian also moved. He raised his hand and reached out toward Yiguchen. No matter what, I'll suppress you first. Emperor Qian said coldly. Yiguchen's background indeed made him a little wary, so he didn't kill him. He wanted to suppress Yiguchen before destroying the great Qian Empire. By then, he believed that even if there were other forces behind Yiguchen, they would not attack the great Qian Empire just because of a small country. Yiguchen's expression under his mask was calm and unperturbed as he faced the approaching giant hand. In the face of a million-strong army, his expression remained unchanged. Facing a false saint expert, he had no fear. The hearts of Yen Wushuang and the others rose to their throats at this moment. They knew that the figure was the only way to save the Swallow Cloud dynasty. Just as Emperor Qian's hand was about to grab Yiguchen, an extremely cold voice rang out from the void. How dare you suppress the Jiankui of the Sword Dynasty? You're courting death. An icy sword aura broke through the void and pierced through the void, causing cracks to appear in the surrounding void. The sword chi slashed down on the Qian Emperor's outstretched arm. The sword swept across and blood splattered everywhere. Emperor Qian's arm was directly chopped off and sent flying. Blood flowed everywhere. The sudden intense pain caused Emperor Qian to groan. His face was pale as he held his severed arm and looked at the void in the distance in horror. The void shattered as a black-robed, gray-haired figure broke through the void. His cold expression swept across the Qian Emperor, Empress Fengye, and the others. How dare you sneak attack His Majesty Qian Emperor? You're courting death. When the great Qian Empire's 4 heavenly guards saw that Emperor Qian's arm was severed, they immediately used their techniques to attack. No, stop. Emperor Qian's expression changed drastically. The reason for that was because he recognized who that gray-haired man was. He wasn't someone that the great Qian Empire could provoke. However, it was too late. The moment the 4 heavenly guards attacked, 4 icy sword auras condensed in the void. Splat. The 4 sword auras slashed down, and blood splattered everywhere. The 4 false saint-level heavenly guards were cleanly killed. This scene caused everyone's eyes to pop out of their sockets. How terrifying was his strength to kill false saint-level experts as if they were dogs? How is this possible? Empress Fengye's face paled. She, who had always been majestic and domineering, felt as if her heart was being squeezed by a hand. She almost couldn't breathe. Sword Senkuyun? Empress Fengye and Emperor Qian asked in shock. If it were any other expert, they wouldn't have lost their composure. But who was Sword Senkuyun? He was a heavenly tribulation saint, an extraordinary being. False saint-level experts like them weren't weak, but they were still like ants in front of a saint-level expert. More importantly, they'd heard what Leng Qianhen had said. The figure who'd sat cross-legged on the ninth heaven, played the zither, and repelled millions of soldiers was Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Everyone from the Swallow Cloud Empire was dumbfounded by this scene. They felt as if they were dreaming, and it was extremely unreal. A heavenly tribulation saint had appeared in front of them alive and killed 4 false saint-level experts. Even the lofty Emperor Qian had lost an arm. What shocked Yan Wushuang and the others even more was that the person who'd saved them was the legendary Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. The Sword Dynasty was the top dynasty among the 100 great dynasties. Not only did they have a heavenly tribulation saint like Leng Qianhen, but they also had powerful half-step saint-level experts like the proud divine state. Even if the great Qian dynasty and Phoenix Nye dynasty worked together, they still wouldn't be a match for such a powerful dynasty. Your friend is Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty? Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others took a deep breath. Although the Sword Dynasty was very far away from them, they'd heard rumors about the Sword Dynasty. Yan Wushuang didn't look happy. Instead, she felt a bit disappointed. That figure wasn't the one she'd been thinking about day and night. After all, Yan Wushuang couldn't have imagined that Ye Guqin would have such a strange encounter and become Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. The probability of such a thing happening was too low, so Yan Wushuang instinctively ruled out the possibility of it being Ye Guqin. Yan Xiaotong's forehead was covered in cold sweat. He'd almost caught Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Your friend is Jian Kuei of the Sword Dynasty. Are you also? Yan Xiaotong swallowed and asked Mu Xingzu. Yes, I'm also the sword son of the Sword Dynasty. What's wrong? Mu Xingzu said nonchalantly. In her opinion, this identity wasn't something to brag about. Yan Xiaotong's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the ground. He'd thought of the 8th prince of the great Qian dynasty as a lifesaver. In the end, Mu Xingzu and the others were the real big shots and saviors. His father, Yan Bailin, also looked unnatural. He'd almost given the order to capture Mu Xingzu and interrogate her, but Yan Chang'e stopped him in the end. Junior sister Mu, you've actually become the sword son of the Sword Dynasty? Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others were also in disbelief. That was the high and mighty 13th sword son of the Sword Dynasty. He had a noble status and looked down on all the other dynasties. I'm nothing. Jian Kuei is the real powerful one, Mu Xingzu said with a smile. Ji Ling, Chu Qingqi, and the others sighed. Yan Wushuang looked at the figure standing in the sky. That invincible aura reminded her of the unyielding figure who'd fought against Gu Shaoyang and Di Haotian. How great would it be if it's really you? Yan Wushuang's eyes gradually became hazy, and tears fell from the corners of her eyes. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.